boy, I'm ready.
Same. The most exciting part of the evening has finally arrived. How am I supposed to juggle Nightmare 95 with this, to be honest? I gotta press like 5 buttons for Nightmare 95, and then I gotta turn pages too. This is gonna be terrible. Wait, Melon, did you already go to sleep before or after before or after Wade's whole schizo rant?
I wasn't here for the schizo rant, but I
Oh,
checked the backlog earlier in the morning. I
oh,
was
did you
like,
see the highlight? That was a hype segment.
I was like,
I love
Jesus
reading this.
Christ,
I love reading this.
5
This is
minutes.
amazing.
An
This
actual Giga Schizo moment.
that was so much fun to read, honestly. I don't know about you guys, but I love reading. Reading is so much fun. Get to insert my own schizo voices in. That's how the characters sound to me.
Oh no.
Alright, so last time where did we stopped? He had just found
He
Tomb of
entered the tomb
Horrors.
and entered as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
level 3.
Oh boy, smart, smart. I'll give it a few more minutes. I'll start at like 10 or 15 if we don't get anybody by 10 or any more people by like 10. Okay, that's probably everybody. So let us begin. The walls of the corridor leading into the tomb were covered with dozens of strange paintings depicting enslaved humans, orcs, elves, and other creatures. Each fresco appeared in the exact location described in the original D&D module. I knew that hidden in the tiled stone surface of the floor were several spring-loaded trapdoors. If you stepped on one, it snapped open and dropped you into a pit filled with poisoned iron spikes. But because the location of each hidden trapdoor was clearly marked on my map, I was able to avoid them all. So far, everything had followed the original module to the letter. If the same was true for the rest of the tomb, I might be able to survive long enough to locate the copper key. There were only a few monsters lurking in this dungeon: a gargoyle, a skeleton, a zombie, some ass, a mummy, and the evil demi-lich himself, Asarak himself. Since the map told me where each of them was hiding, I should be able to avoid fighting them, unless, of course, one of them was guarding the copper key. And I could already guess who probably had that honor. I tried to proceed carefully, as if I had no idea what to expect. Avoiding the sphere of annihilation located at the end of the corridor, I located a hidden door beside the last pit trap. It opened into a small sloping passageway. My flashlight reached into the darkness ahead, flickering off the damp stone walls. My surroundings made me feel like I was in a low-budget sword and sorcery flick, like Hawk the Slayer or the Beastmaster. I began to make my way through the dungeon, room by room, even though I knew where all the traps were located. I still had to proceed carefully to avoid them all. In a dark, forbidding chamber, known as the Chapel of Evil, I found thousands of gold and silver coins hidden in the pews right where they were supposed to be. It was more money than my avatar could carry, even with the bag of holding that I'd found. I gathered up as many of the gold coins as I could, and they appeared in my inventory. The currency was automatically converted, and my credit counter jumped to over 20,000, by far the largest amount of money I'd ever had. And in addition to the credits, my avatar received an equal number of experience points for obtaining the coins. As I continued deeper into the tomb, I obtained several magic items along the way: a +1 flaming sword, a gem of seeing, a +1 ring of protection. I even found a suit of +3 full plate armor. These were the first magic items my avatar had ever possessed, and they made me feel unstoppable. When I put on the suit of magical armor, it shrank to fit my avatar perfectly. Its gleaming chrome appearance reminded me of the badass armor worn by the knights in Excalibur. I actually switched to a third person view for a few seconds, just to admire how cool my avatar looked wearing it. The farther I went, the more confident I became. The tomb's layout and contents continued to match the module description exactly, down to the last detail. That is, until I reached the pillared throne room. It was a large square chamber with a high ceiling filled with dozens of massive stone columns. A huge raised dais stood at the far end of the room, atop which rested an obsidian throne inlaid with silver and ivory skulls. All this matched the module description exactly, with one huge difference. The throne was supposed to be empty, but it wasn't. The demi-lich Astarak was sitting on it, glaring down at me silently. A dusty gold crown glinted on his withered head. He appeared exactly as he did on the cover of the original Tomb of Horrors module, but according to its text, Astarak wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be waiting in a burial chamber much deeper in the dungeon. I considered running, but decided against it. If Halliday had placed the lich in this room, perhaps he'd place the copper key here too. I had to find out. I walked across the chamber to the foot of the dais. From here I could see the lich more clearly. His teeth were 2 rows of pointed cut diamonds arrayed in a lipless grin, and a large ruby was set in each of his eye sockets. For the first time since entering the tomb, I wasn't sure what to do next. My chances of surviving one-on-one combat with the demi-lich were non-existent. My wimpy +1 flaming sword couldn't even affect him, and the 2 magic rubies in his eye sockets had the power to suck out my avatar's life force and kill me instantly. Even a party of 6 or 7 high-level avatars would have had a difficult time defeating him. I silently wished, not for the last time, that the Oasis was like an old adventure game and that I could save my place. But it wasn't, and I couldn't. If my avatar died here, it would mean starting over with nothing. But there was no point in hesitating now. If the lich killed me, I would come back tomorrow night and try again. The entire tomb should reset when the Oasis server clock struck midnight. If it did, all of the hidden traps I disarmed would reset themselves, and the treasure and magic items would reappear. I tapped the record icon at the edge of my display so that whatever happened next would be stored in a vidcat file I could play back and study later. But when I tapped the icon, I got a recording not allowed message. It seemed that Halliday had disabled recording inside the tomb. I took a deep breath, raised my sword, and placed my right foot on the bottom step of the dais. As I did, there was a sound like cracking bones as Astarak slowly lifted his head. The rubies in his eye sockets began to glow with an intense red light. I took several steps backward, expecting him to leap down and attack me, but he didn't. But he didn't rise from his throne. Instead, he lowered his head and fixed me with his chilling gaze. How do I do his voice? "Greetings, Parzival," he said in a rasping... Wait, oh. How do I do a rasping voice, damn it? Wait, I'm gonna throw out my throat like this, oh god.
I got you.
Okay, all right. No, I got this.
Okay.
"Greetings, Parzival," he said in a rasping voice. "What is it that you seek?" This caught me off guard. According to the module, the lich wouldn't speak. He was just supposed to attack, leaving me with no choice but to kill him or run for my life. "I seek the copper key," I replied. Then I remembered I was speaking to a king, so I quickly bowed my head, dropped to one knee, and added, "Your Majesty." "Of course you do," Astarak said, motioning for me to rise. "And you've come to the right place." He stood, and his mummified skin cracked like old leather as he moved. I clutched my sword more tightly, still anticipating an attack. "How can I know that you are worthy of possessing the copper key?" he asked. Holy shit! How the hell was I supposed to answer that? And what if I gave the wrong answer? Would he suck out my soul and incinerate me? I racked my brain for a suitable reply. The best I could come up with was, "Allow me to prove my worth, noble Astarak." The lich let out a long, disturbing cackle that echoed off the chamber stone walls. "Very well," he said. "You shall prove your worth by facing me in a joust. I, I, I'd never heard of an undead Lich King challenging someone to a joust, especially not in a subterranean burial chamber. Alright, I said uncertainly, but won't we be needing horses for that? Not horses, he replied, stepping away from his throne. Birds. He waved a skeletal hand at his throne. There was a brief flash of light, accompanied by a transformation sound effect, which I was pretty sure had been lifted from the old Super Friends cartoon. The throne melted and morphed into an old coin-operated video game cabinet. 2 joysticks protruded from its control panel, one yellow, one blue. I couldn't help but grin as I read the name on the game's backlit marquee. Joust, Williams Electronics, 1982. Best 2 out of 3 games, Astarak rasped. If you win, I shall grant you what you seek. What if you win? I asked, already knowing the answer. If I am victorious, the Lich said, the rubies in his eye sockets blazing even brighter, then you shall die. A ball of swirling orange flame appeared in his right hand. He raised it threateningly. Of course, I said. That was my first guess. Just wanted to double check. The fireball in Astarak's hand vanished. He stretched out his leathery palm, which now had held 2 shiny quarters. The games are on me, he said. He stepped up to the joust machine and dropped both quarters into the left coin slot. The game emitted 2 low electronic chimes, and the credit counter jumped from 0 to 2. Astarak took hold of the yellow joystick on the left side of the control panel and closed his bony fingers around it. Art thou ready? He croaked. Yeah, I said, taking a deep breath. I cracked my knuckles and grabbed the Player 2 joystick with my left hand, poising my right hand over the flat button. Astarak rocked his head from left to right, cracking his neck. It sounded like a snapping tree branch. Then he slapped the 2-player button, and the joust began. Joust was a classic 80s arcade game with a strange premise. Each player controls a knight armed with a lance. Player 1 is mounted on an ostrich, while player 2 is mounted on a stork. You flap your wings to fly around the screen and joust with the other player, and also against several computer-controlled enemy knights who are all mounted on buzzards. When you crash into an opponent, whoever's lance is higher on the screen wins the joust. The loser is killed and loses a life. Whenever you kill one of the enemy knights, his buzzer craps on a green egg that quickly hatches into another enemy knight if you don't scoop it up in time. There's also a winged pterodactyl that appears once in a while to wreak havoc. I hadn't played Joust in over a year. It was one of H's favorite games, and for a while, he'd had a Joust cabinet in his chat room. He used to challenge me to a game whenever he wanted to settle an argument or some asinine pop culture dispute. For a few months, we played almost every day. In the beginning, H was slightly better than I was, and he had a habit of gloating over his victories. This had really irked me, so I started practicing Joust on my own, playing a few games a night against an AI opponent. I honed my skills until I got good enough to beat H repeatedly, consistently. Then I began to gloat over him, savoring my revenge. The last time we played, I'd rubbed his nose in defeat so mercilessly that he flipped out and vowed never to play me again. Since then, we used Street Fighter 2 to settle our disputes. My joust skills were a lot rustier than I thought. I spent the first 5 minutes just trying to relax and reacquaint myself with the controls and the rhythm of the game. During this time, Astarak managed to kill me twice, mercilessly slamming his winged mount into mine at the perfect trajectory. He handled the game's controls with the calculated perfection of a machine, which of course was exactly what he was. Cutting-edge NPC artificial intelligence programmed by Halliday himself. By the end of our first game, the moves and tricks I picked up during all those marathon bouts with H were starting to come back to me, but Astarak didn't need a warm-up. He was in perfect form from the outset, and there was no way I could make up for my weak showing at the start of the game. He killed off my last man before I even cleared 30,000 points. Embarrassing. One game down, Parzival, he said, flashing a rictus grin. One more to go. He didn't waste time by making me stand there and watch him play out the rest of his game. He reached up and found the power switch at the rear of the game cabinet, then flipped it off and back on again. After the screen cycled through its chromatic Williams Electronics boot-up sequence, he snatched 2 more quarters out of thin air and dropped them into the game. Art thou ready? He inquired again, hunching over the control panel. I hesitated a moment, then asked, Actually, would you mind if we switch sides? I'm used to playing on the left. It was true. When H and I played it in the basement, I always took the ostrich side. Being on the right side during the first game had screwed up my rhythm a bit. Astarak appeared to consider my request for a moment. Then he nodded. Certainly, he said. He stepped back from the cabinet, and we switched sides. It suddenly occurred to me just how absurd this scene was. A guy wearing a suit of armor, standing next to an undead king, both hunched over the controls of a classic arcade game. The sort of surreal image you'd expect to see on the cover of an old issue of Heavy Metal or Drag magazine. Astarak slapped the 2-player button, and my eyes locked on the screen. The next game started out badly for me too. My opponent's movements were relentless and precise, and I spent the first few waves just trying to evade him. I was also distracted by the incessant click of his skeletal index finger as he tapped his flat button. I unclenched my jaw, cleared my mind, forcing myself not to think about where I was, who I was playing against, or what was at stake. I tried to imagine that I was back in the basement, playing against H. It worked. I slipped into the zone, and the tide began to turn in my favor. I began to find the flaws in the Lich's playing style and the holes in its programming. This was something I learned over the years, mastering hundreds of different video games. There was always a trick to beating a computer-controlled opponent. At a game like this, a gifted human player would always triumph over the game's AI because software couldn't improvise. It could either react randomly or in a limited number of predetermined ways based on a finite number of pre-programmed conditions. This was an axiom in video games and would be until humans invented true artificial intelligence. Our second game came right down to the wire, but by the end of it, I spotted a pattern to the Lich's playing technique. By changing my ostrich's direction at a certain moment, I could get him to slam his stork into one of the oncoming buzzards. By repeating this move, I was able to pick off his extra lives one by one. I died several times in the process, but I finally took him down during the 10th wave with no extra lives of my own to spare. I stepped back from the machine and sighed with relief. I could feel rivulets of sweat running down my forehead and around the edge of my visor. I wiped at my face with the sleeve of my shirt, and my avatar mimicked this motion. Good game, Astarak said, and then to my surprise, he offered me his withered claw of a hand. I shook it, chuckling nervously as I did. Yeah, I replied, good game, man. It occurred to me that, in a weird way, I was actually playing against Halliday. I quickly pushed the thought out of my head, afraid I might psych myself out. Astarak once again produced 2 quarters and dropped them into the joust machine. This one is for all the marbles, he said. Art thou ready? I nodded. This time I took the liberty of slapping the 2-player button myself. Our final tie-breaking game lasted longer than the first 2 combined. During the final wave, so many buzzers filled the screen that it was hard to move without getting dusted by one of them. The Lich and I faced off one final time at the very top of the playing field, both of us incessantly hitting our flat buttons while slamming our joysticks left and right. Astarak made a final, desperate move to avoid my charge and dropped a micrometer too low. His final melt died in a tiny, pixelated explosion. Player 2, game over, appeared on the screen, and the Lich let out a long, blood-curdling howl of rage. He smashed an angry fist into the side of the joust cabinet, shattering it into a million tiny pixels that scattered and bounced across the floor. Then he turned to face me. Congratulations, Parzival, he said, bowing low. You played well. Thank you, noble Astarak, I replied, resisting the urge to jump up and down and shake my ass victoriously in his general direction. Instead, I solemnly returned his bow. As I did, the Lich transformed into a tall human wizard dressed in flowing black robes. I recognized him immediately. It was Halliday's avatar, Anorak. I stared at him, utterly speechless. For years, beaters had speculated that Anorak still roamed the Oasis. Now as an autonomous NPC, Halliday's ghost in the shell. Now, the wizard said, speaking with Halliday's familiar voice, your reward. The chamber filled with the sound of a full orchestra. Triumphant horns were quickly joined by a stirring string section. I recognized the music. It was the last track from John Williams' original Star Wars score, used in the scene where Princess Leia gives Luke and Han their medals, and Chewbacca, as you may recall, gets the shaft. As the music built to a crescendo, Anorak stretched out his right hand. There, resting in his open palm, was the copper key, the item for which millions of people had been searching for the past 5 years. As he handed it to me, the music faded out, and in the same instant, I heard a chime sound. I just gained 50,000 experience points, enough to raise my avatar all the way to the 10th level. Farewell, Sir Parzival, Anorak said. I bid you good luck on your quest. And before I could ask what I was supposed to do next, or where I could find the first gate, his avatar vanished in a flash of light, accompanied by a teleportation sound effect I knew was lifted from the 80s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. I found myself standing alone on the empty days. I looked down at the copper key in my hand and felt overcome with wonder and elation. It looked just as it had in Anorak's invitation. A simple antique copper key, its oval-shaped bow embossed within Roman numeral I. Oh, wait, that's 1, isn't it? With the Roman numeral 1. I turned it over in my avatar's hand, watching the torchlight play across the Roman numeral, and that was when I spotted 2 small lines of text engraved into the metal. I tilted the key up to the light and read them aloud. What you seek lies hidden in the trash on the deepest level of Daggerath. I didn't even need to read it a second time. I instantly understood its meaning. I knew exactly where I needed to go and what I would have to do once I got there. Hidden in the trash was a reference to the ancient TRS-80 line of computers made by Tandy and Radio Shack in the 70s and 80s. Computer users of that era had given the TRS-80 the derogatory nickname of Trash 80. What you seek lies hidden in the trash. Halliday's first computer had been a TRS-80 with a whopping 16K of RAM, and I knew exactly where to find a replica of that computer in the Oasis. Every beater did. In the early days of the Oasis, Halliday had created a small planet named Middletown, named after his hometown in Ohio. The planet was the site of a meticulous recreation of his hometown as it was in the late 1980s. That saying about how you could never go home again? Halliday had found a way. Middletown was one of his pet projects, and he'd spent years coding and refining it, and it was well known, to beaters at least, that one of the most detailed and accurate parts of the Middletown simulation was the recreation of Halliday's boyhood home. I'd never been able to visit it, but I'd seen hundreds of screenshots and vidcaps of the place. Inside Halliday's bedroom was a replica of his first computer, the TRS-80 Color Computer 2. I was positive that was where he'd hidden the first gate, and the second line of text inscribed on the copper key told me how to reach it. On the deepest level of Daggerath. Daggerath was a word in Sindarin, the Elvish language J.R. Tolkien had created for The Lord of the Rings. The word Daggerath meant battle, but Tolkien had spelled the word with just 1 G, not 2. Daggerath with 2 G's could refer only to one thing, an incredibly obscure computer game called Dungeons of Daggerath, released in 1982. The game had been made for just one platform, the TRS-80 Color Computer. Halliday had written in Anorak's Almanac that Dungeons of Daggerath was the game that made him decide he wanted to become a video game designer. And Dungeons of Daggerath was one of the games sitting in the shoebox next to the TRS-80 in the recreation of Halliday's childhood bedroom. All I had to do was teleport to Middletown, go to Halliday's house, sit down at his TRS-80, play the game, reach the bottom of the dungeon, and that was where I'd find the first gate. At least, that was my interpretation. Middletown was in Sector 7, a long way from Ludus, but I'd collected more than enough gold and treasure to pay for the teleportation fare to get there. By my avatar's previous standards, I was now filthy rich. I checked the time. 11:03 p.m. OST Oasis server time, which also happened to be Eastern Standard Time. I had 8 hours before I had to be at school. That might be enough time. I could go for it right now, sprint like hell, back up through the dungeon to the surface, then hightail it back to the nearest transport terminal. From there, I could teleport directly to Middletown. If I left right now, I should be able to reach Halliday's TRS 80 in under an hour. I knew I should get some sleep first. I'd been logged into the Oasis for almost 15 solid hours, and tomorrow was Friday. I could teleport to Middletown right now, right after school, and then I'd have the whole weekend to tackle the first gate. But who was I kidding? There was no way I'd be able to sleep tonight or sit through school tomorrow. I had to go now. I began to sprint for the exit, but then stopped in the middle of the chamber. Through the open door, I saw a long shadow bouncing on the wall, accompanied by the echo of approaching footsteps. A few seconds later, the silhouette of an avatar appeared in the doorway. I was about to reach for my sword when I realized I was still holding the copper key in my hand. I shoved it into a pouch on my belt and folded my sword out of its scabbard. As I raised my blade, the avatar spoke. Wait. As an aside, can you guys guess who this person could possibly be? Remember, Ernest Klein is a hack writer. Who could this avatar possibly be?
Totally not going to introduce the main love interest right now.
Possibly.
Who could it possibly be, boys and girls?
I fucking wonder.
Who the hell are you? The silhouette demanded. The voice sounded like... Wait, I can't do it. How am I supposed to do a... Am I supposed to do a falsetto here?
I hate this book!
Oh, Melanie couldn't guess it.
No, I think we all could guess it.
Who the hell are you? The silhouette demanded. The voice sounded like it belonged to a lone woman, one who was itching for a fight. When I failed to answer, a stocky female avatar stepped out of the shadows and into the chamber's flickering torchlight. She had raven hair, styled Joan of Arc short, and appeared to be in her late teens or early 20s. When she got closer, I realized I knew her. We'd never actually met, but I'd recognize her face from dozens of screenshots that she'd posted to her blog over the years. It was R3 Miss. She wore a suit of scaled gunmetal blue armor that looked more sci-fi than fantasy. Twin blaster pistols were slung low on her hip in quick-draw holsters, and there was a long, curved, elvish sword in a scabbard across her back. She wore fingerless, road warrior style racing gloves and a pair of classic Ray-Ban shades. Overall, she seemed to be going for a sort of mid-80s post-apocalyptic cyberpunk girl next door look, and it was working for me in a big way. In a word, hot. As she walked toward me, the heels of her studded combat boots clicked on the stone floor. She halted just out of my sword's reach, but did not draw her own blade. Instead, she slid her shades up onto her avatar's forehead, a blatant affectation since sunglasses didn't actually affect a player's vision, and looked me up and down, making a show of sizing me up. For a moment, I was too starstruck to speak. To break my paralysis, I reminded myself that the person operating the avatar in front of me might not be a woman at all. This girl, whom I'd been cyber crushing on for the past 3 years, might very well be an obese, hairy-knuckled guy named Chuck. Once I conjured up that sobering image, I was able to focus on my situation and the question at hand. What was she doing here? After 5 years of searching, I thought it was highly improbable that we both discovered the Copper Key's hiding place on the same night. Too big of a coincidence. Cat got your tongue? She asked. I said, who the hell are you? Like her, I had my avatar's name tag switched off. Clearly, I wanted to remain anonymous, especially under the circumstances. Couldn't she take a hint? Greetings, I said, bowing slightly. I am Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez. She smirked. Chief Metallurgist to King Charles V of Spain? At your service, I replied, grinning. She'd caught my obscure Highlander quote and thrown another right back at me. It was R3 Miss, all right. Cute. She glanced over my shoulder, up at the empty days, then back at me. So spill it. How did you do it? Or, so spill it. How did you do? Do at what? Jousting against Asarak? She said, as if it were obvious. Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't the first time she'd been here. I wasn't the first beater to decipher the limerick and find the Tomb of Horrors. Arthremus had beaten me to it, and since she knew about the joust game, she'd obviously already faced the Lich herself. But if she already had the copper key, there wouldn't be any reason for her to come back here. So she clearly didn't have the key yet. She'd faced the Lich at joust, and he'd beaten her. So she'd come back to try again. For all I knew, this could be her 8th or ninth attempt. And she obviously assumed the Lich had beaten me, too. Hello, she said, tapping her right foot impatiently. I'm waiting. I considered making a break for it, just running right past her, back out through the labyrinth and up to the surface. But if I ran, she might suspect that I had the key and decide to try and kill me to get it. The surface of Ludus was clearly marked as a safe zone on the Oasis map, so no player versus player combat was allowed. But I had no way of knowing if the same was true of this tomb because it was underground. It didn't even appear on the planet map. Arthurimus looked like a formidable opponent. Body armor, blaster pistols, that elvish sword she was carrying might be Vorpal. If even half the exploits she mentioned on her blog were true, her avatar was probably at least 50th level, or higher. If PvP combat were permitted down here, she'd kick my 10th level ass. So I had to play it cool. I decided to lie. I got creamed, I said. Joust isn't really my game. She relaxed her posture slightly. That seemed to be the answer she wanted to hear. Yeah, same here, she said in a commiserating tone. Holiday program old King Asarak with some pretty wicked AI, didn't he? He's insanely hard to beat. She glanced down at my sword, which I was still brandishing defensively. You can put that away. I'm not gonna bite you. I kept my sword raised. Is this tomb in a PvP zone? Don't know. You're the first avatar I'd ever run into down here. She tilted her head slightly and smiled. I suppose there's only one way to find out. She drew her sword lightning fast, turned it into a clockwise spin, bringing its glowing blade around and down at me, all in a single blur of motion. At the last second, I managed to tilt my own blade upward to awkwardly parry the attack. But both of our swords halted in midair, inches apart, as if held back by some invisible force. A message flashed on my display. Player versus player combat not permitted here. I breathed a sigh of relief. I wouldn't learn until later that the keys were non-transferable. You couldn't drop one of them or give them to another avatar, and if you're killed while holding one, it vanished right along with the body. Well, there you have it, she said, grinning. This is a no PvP zone after all. She whipped her sword around in a figure-8 pattern, then smoothly replaced it in the scabbard on her back. Very slick. I sheathed my own sword too, but without any fancy moves. Halliday must not have wanted anyone to duel for the right to joust the king, I said. Yeah, she said, grinning. Lucky for you. Lucky for me, I replied, folding my arms. How do you figure? She motioned to the empty days behind me. You must be really hurting for hit points right now after fighting Asarak. So, if Asarak beat you at joust, then you had to fight him. Good thing I won, I thought. Or else I'd probably be creating a new avatar right about now. I've got hit points galore, I fibbed. That Lich was a total wuss. Oh, really? She said suspiciously. I'm 52nd level, and he's nearly killed me every time I've had to fight him. I had to stock up on extra healing potions every time I come down here. She eyed me a moment, then said, I also recognize your sword and the armor you're wearing. You got them both right here in this dungeon, which means they're better than whatever your avatar had before. You look like a low-level wimpazoid to me, Juan Ramirez, and I think you're hiding something. Now that I knew she couldn't attack me, I considered telling her the truth. Why not just whip out the copper key and show it to her? But I thought better of it. The smart move now was to split and head straight to Middletown while I still had a head start. She still didn't have the key. I might not get it for another several days. If I hadn't already had so many hours of joust practice under my belt, God knows how many attempts it would have taken me to beat Asarak. Think what you want, She-Ra, I said, moving past her. Maybe I'll run into you off-world sometime. We can duke it out then. I gave her a small wave. See you around. Where do you think you're going? She said, following me. Home, I said, still walking. But what about the Lich and the copper key? She motioned to the empty days. He'll respawn in a few minutes. When the Oasis server clock hits midnight, the whole tomb resets. If you wait right here, you'll get another shot at beating him without having to make your way through all those traps again first. That's why I've been coming here just before midnight every other day, so I can get in 2 attempts in a row, back to back. Clever. If I hadn't succeeded on my first try, I wonder how long it would have taken me to figure that out. I thought we could take turns playing against him, I said. I just played him, so it'll be your turn at midnight, okay? Then I'll come back after midnight tomorrow. We can alternate days until one of us beats him. Sound fair? I suppose, she said, studying me. But you should stick around anyway. Something different might happen if there are 2 avatars here at midnight. Anorak probably prepared for that contingency. Maybe 2 instances of the Lich will appear, 1 for each of us to play. Or maybe... I prefer to play in private, I said. Let's just take turns, okay? I was almost to the exit when she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Come on, hold on a second, she said, her voice softening. Please. I could have kept walking right through her avatar, but I didn't. I was desperate to get to Middletown and locate the first gate, but I was also standing in front of the famous Arthurimus, someone I've fantasized about meeting for years, and she was even cooler in person than I'd imagined. I was dying to spend more time with her. I wanted, as the 80s poet Howard Jones would say, to get to know her well. If I left now, I might never run into her again. Listen, she said, glancing at her boots. I apologize for calling you a low-level Wimpazoid. That was not cool. I insulted you. It's okay. You were right, actually. I'm only 10th level. Regardless, you're a fellow beater, and a clever one too, or you wouldn't be standing here. So, I want you to know that I respect you and acknowledge your skills, and I apologize for the trash talk. Apology accepted. No worries. Cool. She looked relieved. Her avatar's facial expressions were extremely realistic, which usually meant they were synced to those of their operator instead of controlled by the software. She must have been using an expensive rig. I was just a little freaked out to find you here, she said. I mean, I knew someone else would find this place eventually, just not this quickly. I've had this tomb all to myself for a while now. How long? I asked, not really expecting her to say. She hesitated, then began to ramble. 3 weeks, she said, exasperated. I've been coming here for 3 frickin' weeks, trying to beat that stupid Lich at that asinine game, and his AI is ridiculous. I mean, I've never even played just before this, and now it's driving me out of my gourd. I swear, I was this close to finally beating his ass a few days ago, but then... She raked her fingers through her hair in frustration. Oh, I can't sleep. I can't eat. My grades are going down the tubes because I've been ditching to practice Joust. I was about to ask if she went to school here on Ludus, but she continued to talk faster and faster, as if a floodgate had opened in her brain. The words just poured out of her. She was barely pausing to breathe. And I came here tonight, thinking this would be the night I could finally beat that bastard and get the copper key. But when I got here, I saw that someone had already uncovered the entrance, so I realized my worst fear had finally come true. Someone else had found the tomb, so I ran all the way down here, totally freaking out. I mean, I wasn't too worried because I didn't think anyone could possibly be Asarak on the first try, but still, she paused to take a deep breath and stopped abruptly. Sorry, she said a second later. I tend to ramble when I'm nervous or excited, and right now I'm sort of both because I've been dying to talk to someone about all of this, but obviously I couldn't tell a soul, right? You can't just mention in casual conversation that you... She cut herself again. Man, I'm such a motor mouth, a jabberjaw, a flittertibby... a flibbertibby... the tongue-tied. Flibbertibbit gibbet. She mimed zipping her lips, locking them, and tossing away the imaginary key without thinking. I mimed grabbing the key out of the air and unlocking her lips. This made her laugh, an honest, genuine laugh that involved a fair amount of snorting, which made me laugh too. She was so charming. Her geeky demeanor and hyperkinetic speech pattern reminded me of Jordan, my favorite character in Real Genius. I never felt such an instant connection with another person in the real world or in the Oasis, not even with age. I felt lightheaded. When she finally got her laughter under control, she said, I really need to set up a filter and edit out that laugh of mine. No, you shouldn't, I said. It's a pretty great laugh, actually. I was wincing at every word coming out of my mouth. I have a dorky laugh, too. Great, Wade, I thought. You just called her laugh dorky real smooth. But she just gave me a shy smile and mouthed the words, thank you. I felt a sudden urge. Guys, come on. Guys, come on. Come on.
What am I listening to?
16.5.
Oh my god. Jesus. I felt a sudden urge to kiss her.
God.
Simulation or not, I didn't care. I was working up the courage to ask for a contact card when she stuck out her hand. I forgot to introduce myself, she said. I'm Arthur, miss. I know, I said, shake your head. I'm actually a huge fan of your blog. I've been a loyal reader for years. Seriously? Her avatar actually seemed to blush. I nodded. It's an honor to meet you, I said. I'm Parzival. I realized I was still holding her hand and made myself let her go. Parzival, eh? She tilted her head slightly. Named after the knight of the round table who found the grail, right? Very cool. I nodded, now even more smitten. I almost always had to explain my name to people. And Artemis was the Greek goddess of the hunt, right? Right, but the normal spelling was already taken, so I had to use elite spelling with a number 3 in place of the E. I know, I said. You mentioned that once on your blog 2 years ago. I almost cited the date of the actual blog entry before I realized it would make me sound like even more of a cyber stalking super creep. You said that you still run into noobs who pronounce it Art 3 miss. Wait, okay, that's insulting. That's insulting. Hold on a moment. That is insulting.
Oh no. We got
No.
red.
You know what? I don't care. I'm a rebel. It will still be R3 miss to me. It will still be R3 miss to me. I don't care. Just like how just like how all the people are called beaters. Yeah, that's canon now. It's canonized. This is the canon. This is the canon, you guys. That's right, she said, grinning at me. I did. She stretched out a racing gloved hand and offered me one of her contact cards. You could design your card to look like just about anything. Arthurius had coded hers to look like a vintage Kenner Star Wars action figure still in the blister pack. The figure was a crude plastic rendering of her avatar with the same face, hair, and outfit. Tiny versions of her guns and sword were included. Her contact info was printed on the card above the figure. Arthurius, 52nd level warrior mage, vehicle sold separately. On the back of the card were links to her blog, email, and phone line. Not only was this the first time a girl had ever given me her card, it was also by far the coolest contact card I had ever seen. This is by far the coolest contact card I have ever seen, I said. Thank you. I handed her one of my own cards, which I designed to look like an original Atari 2600 adventure cartridge with my contact info printed on the label. Parzival, 10th level warrior, used with joystick controller. This is awesome, she said, looking over. What a wicked design. Thanks, I said, blushing under my visor. I wanted to propose marriage. I added her card to my inventory, and it appeared on my item list, right below the copper key. Seeing the key list there snapped me back to reality. What the hell was I doing here? Standing here making small talk with this girl when the first gate was waiting for me? I checked the time. Less than 5 minutes until midnight. Listen, Arthurius, I said. It was truly awesome to meet you, but I gotta get going. Sir, about to reset. I want to clear out of here before all those traps and undead respawn. Oh, okay. She actually sounded disappointed. I should probably prepare for my joust match anyway. But here, let me hit you with a cure serious wound spell before you go. Before I could protest, she laid a hand on my avatar's chest and muttered a few arcane words. My hit point counter was already at maximum, so the spell had no effect. But Arthurius didn't know that. She was still under the assumption that I'd had to fight the Lich. There you go, she said, stepping back. Thanks, I said, but you shouldn't have. We're competitors, you know. I know, but we can still be friends, right? I hope so. Besides, the third gate is still a long way off. I mean, it took 5 years for the two of us to get this far, and I know Halliday's game design strategy. Things are just going to get harder from here on. She lowered her voice. Listen, are you sure you don't want to stick around? I bet we can both play at once. We can give each other jousting tips. I started to spot some flaws in the king's technique. Now I was really starting to feel like a jerk for lying to her. That's a really kind offer, but I have to go. I searched for a plausible excuse. I've, I've got school in the morning. She nodded, but her expression shifted back to one of suspicion. Then her eyes widened, as though an idea had just occurred to her. Her pupils started to dart around, focused on the space in front of her, and I realized she was looking something up in a browser window. A few seconds later, her face contorted in anger. You lying bastard, she shouted. You dishonest sack of crap. She made her web browser window visible to me and spun it around. It displayed the scoreboard and Halliday's website. In all the excitement, I'd forgotten to check it. It looked just as it had for the past 5 years, with one change. My avatar's name now appeared at the very top of the list in first place, with a score of 10,000 points beside it. The other 9 slots still contain Halliday's initials, JDH, followed by zeros. When they lose that game of Joust, Asterak just attacks them, and presumably Artemis just runs away. Like, she takes the damage, but she just runs away, heals back up, comes back. That's probably the implication. Holy shit, I muttered. When Anorak handed me the key, I'd become the first beater in history to score points in the contest. And, I realized, since the scoreboard was viewable to the entire world, my avatar had just become famous. I checked the newsfeed headlines to be sure. Every single one of them contained my avatar's name. Stuff like Mysterious Avatar Parzival makes history and Parzival finds copper key. I stood there in a daze, forcing myself to breathe. Then Arthremis gave me a shove, which of course I didn't feel. She did knock my avatar backward a few feet, though. You beat him on your first try? She shouted. I nodded. He won the first game, but I won the last two, just barely, though. She screamed, clenching her fist. How in the hell did you beat him on your first try? I got the distinct impression she wanted to sock me in the face. It was pure luck, I said. I used to play Joust all the time against a friend of mine, so I'd already had tons of preparation. I'm sure if you had just as much practice. Please, she growled, holding up a hand. Do not patronize me, okay? She let out what I can only describe as a howl of frustration. I don't believe this. Do you realize I've been trying to beat him for 5 goddamn weeks? Hold on a second. I have to message somebody. Skill issue for sure. For sure. For sure. But a minute ago you said it was 3 weeks. Don't interrupt me, she gave me another shot. I've been practicing Joust nonstop for over a month now. I'm seeing flying ostriches in my goddamn sleep. That can't be pleasant. And you just walk in here and nail it on the first try? She started pounding her fist into the center of her forehead, and I realized she was pissed at herself, not me. Listen, I said, it really was luck. I've got a knack for classic arcade games. That's my specialty. I shrugged. Stop hitting yourself like Rain Man, okay? She stopped, stared at me. After a few seconds, she let out a long sigh. Why couldn't it be Centipede, or Ms. Pac-Man, or Burger Time? Then I'd probably have cleared the first gate by now. Well, I don't know about that, I said. She glared at me for a second, then gave me a devilish smile. She turned to face the exit and began to execute a series of elaborate gestures in the air in front of her while whispering the words of some incantation. Hey, I said, hold on a sec, what are you doing? But I already knew. As she finished casting her spell, a giant stone wall appeared, completely covering the chamber's only exit. Shit! She cast a barrier spell. I was trapped inside the room. Oh, come on, I shouted. Why'd you do that? You seem to be in an awful big hurry to get out of here. My guess is that when Anorak gave you the copper key, he also gave you some sort of clue about the location of the first gate, right? That's where you're headed next, isn't it? Yeah, I said. I thought about denying it, but what's the point now? So, unless you can nullify my spell, and I'm betting you can't, Mr. 10th level warrior, that barrier will keep you in here until just after midnight when the server resets. All those traps you disarmed on your way down will reset. That should slow down your exit considerably. Yes, I said, it will. And while you're busy making your way back up to the surface, I'll have another shot at defeating Asarak. And this time, I'm gonna destroy him. And then I'll be right behind you, mister. I folded my arms. If the king has been beating your ass for the past 5 weeks, what makes you think today? What makes you think you're finally gonna win tonight? Competition always brings out the best in me, she said. It always has, and now I've got some serious competition. I glanced over at the magical barrier she'd created. She was over 50th level, so it would remain in existence for the spell's maximum duration, 15 minutes. All I could do was stand there, wait for it to dissipate. You're evil, you know that? I said. She grinned and shook her head. Chaotic neutral, sugar. I grinned back at her. I'm still gonna beat you to the first gate, you know. Probably, she said, but this is just the beginning. You still have to clear it, and there's still 2 more keys to find, 2 more gates to clear. Plenty of time for me to catch up with you and then leave you in the dust, Ace. We'll see about that, lady. She motioned to the window displaying the scoreboard. You're famous now, she said. You realize what that means, don't you? I haven't had much time to think about it yet. Well, I have. I've been thinking about it for the past 5 weeks. Your avatar's name on that scoreboard is going to change everything. The public will become obsessed with the contest again, just like when it first began. The media is already going berserk. By tomorrow, Parzival will be a household name. That thought made me a little queasy. You could become famous in the real world too, she said, if you reveal your identity to the media. I'm not an idiot. Good. Because there are billions of dollars up for grabs, and now everyone is going to assume you know how and where to find the egg. There are a lot of people who would kill for that information. I know that, I said, and I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine. But I didn't feel fine. What I hadn't really considered any of this. Maybe because I never really believed I would actually be in this position. We stood in silence, watching the clock and waiting. What'd you do if you won? She suddenly asked. How would you spend all that money? I had spent a lot of time thinking about that. I daydreamed about it all the time. H and I had made absurd lists of things we would buy and we would do and buy if we won the prize. I don't know, I said. The usual, I guess. Move into a mansion, buy a bunch of cool shit, not be poor. Wow, big dreamer, she said. And after you buy your mansion and your cool shit, what will you do with the 130 billion you'll have left over? Not wanting her to think I was some shallow idiot, I impulsively blurted out what I'd always dreamed of doing if I won. It was something I never told anyone. My man's really dropping a spaghetti, isn't he? Hold on. I'd spend it on gacha, to be honest. That's a lot of gacha rolls.
Buy side games.
Hell yeah. I'd have a nuclear-powered interstellar spacecraft constructed in Earth's orbit, I said. I'd stock it with a lifetime supply of food and water, a self-sustaining biosphere, and a supercomputer loaded with every movie, book, song, video game, and piece of artwork that human civilization has ever created, along with a standalone copy of the Oasis. Then I'd invite a few of my closest friends to come aboard, along with a team of doctors and scientists, and we'd all get the hell out of Dodge, leave the solar system, start looking for an extrasolar, Earth like planet. I hadn't thought this plan all the way through yet, of course. I still had a lot of details to work out. She raised an eyebrow. That's pretty ambitious, she said. But you do realize that nearly half the people on this planet are starving, right? I detected no malice in her voice. She sounded like she genuinely believed I might not be aware of this fact. Yes, I know, I said defensively. The reason so many people are starving is because we've wrecked the planet. The Earth is dying, it's time to leave. That's a pretty negative outlook, she said. If I win that dough, I'm going to make sure everyone on this planet has enough to eat. Once we tackle world hunger, then we can figure out how to fix the environment, solve the energy crisis. I rolled my eyes. Right. And after you pull off that miracle, you can genetically engineer a bunch of smurfs and unicorns to frolic around this new perfect world you've created. I'm being serious, she said. You think it's that simple? I said. That you can just write a check for $240 billion and fix all the world's problems? I don't know, maybe not, but I'm gonna give it a shot. If you win. Right, if I win. Just then, the Oasis server clock struck midnight. We both knew the second it happened because the throne reappeared atop the dais along with Astarak. He sat there motionless, looking just like he did when I first entered the room. Arthremis glanced up at him, then back at me. She smiled, gave me a small wave. I'll see you around, Parzival. Yeah, I replied. See ya. She turned, began to walk toward the dais. I called after her. Hey, Arthremis. She turned back. For some reason, I felt compelled to help her, even though I knew I shouldn't. Try playing on the left side, I said. That's how I won. I think he might be easier to beat if he's playing a stork. She stared at me for a second, possibly trying to gauge whether I was messing with her. Then she nodded and ascended the dais. Astarak came to life as soon as she set foot on the first step. Greetings, Arthremis, his voice boomed. Oh, wait, this is a raspy voice, isn't it? Greetings, Arthremis, his voice boomed. What is it that you seek? I couldn't hear her reply, but a few seconds later, the throne transformed into the joust game just as it had earlier. Arthremis said something to the Lich, and the two of them switched sides so that she was on the left. Then they began to play. I watched them play from a distance until a few minutes later when our barrier dissipated. I cast one last glance up at Arthremis, then threw open the door and ran out. It took me a little over an hour to make my way back through the tomb and up to the surface. The instant I crawled outside, a message is waiting indicator began to flash on my display. I had realized then that Halliday had placed the tomb inside a null communication zone, so no one could receive calls, text, or email while they were inside, probably to prevent beaters from calling for help or advice. I checked my messages, saw that H had been trying to reach me since my name had appeared on the scoreboard. He'd called over a dozen times and had also sent several text messages asking me what in the sweet name of Christ was going on and screaming at me in all caps to call him back right now. Just as I had finished deleting these messages, I received another call. It was H trying once again to reach me. I decided not to pick up. Instead, I sent him a short text message promising to call as soon as I could. As I ran out of the forest, I kept the scoreboard up in a corner of my display, so I know immediately if Arthremis won her joust match and obtained the key. When I finally reached the transport terminal and jumped into the nearest booth, it was just after 2 o'clock in the morning. I entered my destination on the booth's touchscreen, and a map of Middletown appeared on the display. I was prompted to select one of the planet's 256 transport terminals as my arrival point. When Halliday had created Middletown, he hadn't placed just a single recreation of his hometown there. He made 256 identical copies of it, spread out evenly across the planet's surface. I didn't think it would matter which copy of his hometown I went to, so I selected one at random near the equator. Then I tapped confirm to pay the fare, and my avatar vanished. A millisecond later, I was standing inside a vintage 1980s phone booth located inside an old Greyhound bus station. I opened the door, stepped out. It was like stepping out of a time machine. Several NPCs milled around, all dressed in mid 1980s attire. A woman with a giant ozone depleting hairdo bobbed her head to an oversized Walkman. A kid in a gray members only jacket leaned against the wall, working on a Rubik's Cube. A mohawked punk rocker sat in a plastic chair watching a Riptide rerun on a coin operated television. I located the exit and headed for it, drawing my sword as I went. The entire surface of Middletown was a PvP zone, so I had to proceed with caution. Shortly after the hunt began, this planet had turned into Grand Central Station, and all 256 copies of Halliday's hometown had been scoured and ransacked by an endless parade of beaters, all searching for keys and clues. The popular theory on the message boards was that Halliday had created several multiple copies of his hometown so that several avatars could search it at the same time without fighting over a single location. Of course, all this searching had yielded a big fat donut. No keys, no clues, no egg. Since then, interest in the planet had waned dramatically, but some beaters probably still came here on occasion. If there was already another beater inside Halliday's house when I got there, my plan was to make a run for it, then steal a car and drive 25 miles in any direction to the next identical copy of Middletown. And then to the next, until I found an instance of Halliday's house that was unoccupied. Outside the bus station, it was a beautiful Midwestern day. The reddish orange sun hovered low in the sky. Even though I'd never been to Middletown before, I'd done extensive research on it. So I knew Halliday had coded the planet so that no matter when you visited or when you were on the surface, it was always a perfect late autumn afternoon, circa 1986. I pulled up a map of the town and traced the route from my current location to Halliday's childhood home. It was about a mile to the north. I pointed my avatar in that direction and began to run. Looking around, I was astounded by the painstaking attention to detail. I had read that Halliday had done all the coding himself, drawing on his memories to recreate his hometown exactly as it was during his childhood. He'd used old street maps, phone books, photographs, and video footage for reference to make everything as authentic and accurate as possible. The place reminded me a lot of the town in the movie Footloose. Small, rural, and sparsely populated. The houses all seemed incredibly big and were placed ridiculously far apart. It astounded me that 50 years ago, even lower income families had an entire house to themselves. The NPC citizens all looked like extras from a John Cougar Mellencamp movie. I saw people out raking leaves, walking dogs, sitting on porches. Out of curiosity, I waved at a few of them and got a friendly wave in return every time. Clues as to the time period were everywhere. NPC piloted cars and trucks cruised slowly up and down the shady streets, all of them gas guzzling antiques, Transams, Dodge Omnis, IROC Z28s, and K cars. I passed the service station, and the sign said gasoline was only 93 cents a gallon. I was about to turn down Halliday Street when I heard a fanfare of trumpets. My eyes shot over to the scoreboard window, still hovering in the corner of my display. Arthur had done it. Her name now appeared directly below mine. Her score was 9,000 points, 1,000 points less than mine. It appeared I received a bonus for being the first avatar to obtain a copper key. The full ramifications of the scoreboard's existence occurred to me for the first time. From here on out, it would not only allow beaters to keep track of each other's progress, it would also show the entire world who the current runners were, creating instant celebrities and targets in the process. I knew at that exact moment Arthremis must be staring down her own copy of the copper key, reading the clue engraved on its surface. I was sure she'd be able to decipher it just as quickly as I had. In fact, she was probably already on her way to Middletown right now. That got me moving again. I now had less than an hour's head start on her, maybe less. When I reached Cleveland Avenue, the street on which Halliday had grown up, I sprinted down that cracked sidewalk to the front steps of his childhood home. It looked just like the photographs I'd seen, a modest, two-story colonial with red vinyl siding. Two late 70s Ford sedans were parked in the driveway, one of them up on cinder blocks. Looking at the replica Halliday had created of his old house, I tried to imagine what it had been like for him to grow up there. I read that in the real Middletown, Ohio, every house on the street had been demolished in the late 90s to make room for a strip mall. But Halliday had preserved his childhood forever here in the oasis. I ran up the walkway and entered through the front door, which opened into the living room. I knew this room well because it appeared in Anorak's invitation. I recognized the simulated wood grain paneling, the burnt orange carpet, and the garish furniture that looked like it had been scavenged from several disco era yard sales. The house was empty. For whatever reason, Halliday had decided not to place NPC recreations of himself or his deceased parents here. Perhaps that would have been too creepy, even for him. However, I did spot a familiar family photo on the living room wall. This portrait had been taken at the local Kmart in 1984, but Mr. and Mrs. Halliday were still dressed in late 70s fashion. 12-year-old Jimmy stood between them, glowering at the camera from behind thick eyeglasses. The Hallidays looked like an ordinary American family. There was no hint that the stoic man in the brown leisure suit was an abusive alcoholic, that the smiling woman in the floral pantsuit was bipolar, or that the young boy in the faded asteroids t-shirt would one day create an entirely new universe. Looking around, I wondered why Halliday, who always claimed to have had a miserable childhood, had later become so nostalgic for it. I knew that if and when I finally escaped from the stacks, I never looked back, and I definitely wouldn't create a detailed simulation of the place. I glanced over at the bulky Zenith television and the Atari 2600 connected to it. The simulated wood grain on the Atari's plastic casing perfectly matched the simulated wood grain on the television cabinet and on the living room walls. Beside the Atari was a shoebox containing 9 game cartridges: Combat, Space Invaders, Pitfall, Kaboom, Star Raiders, The Empire Strikes Back, Star Master, Yard's Revenge, and E.T. Beaters had attached a large amount of significance to the absence of adventure. The game Halliday was seen playing on this very same Atari at the end of Anorak's invitation. People had searched the entire Middletown simulation for a copy of it, but there didn't appear to be one anywhere on the whole planet. Beaters had brought copies of Adventure here from other planets, but when they tried to play them on Halliday's Atari, they never worked. So far, no one had ever been able to figure out why. I did a quick search of the rest of the house and made sure no other avatars were present. Then, I opened the door to James Halliday's room. It was empty, so I stepped inside and locked the door. Screenshots and sim caps of this room had been available for years. I'd studied all of them closely, but this was my first time standing inside the real thing. I got chills. Hang on a sec. Hi, T-Fam. You joining along for story time? The carpet was a horrendous mustard color, so was the wallpaper, but the walls were almost entirely covered with movie and rock band posters. Real Genius, War Games, Tron, Pink Floyd, Devo, Rush. A bookshelf stood just inside the door, overflowing with science fiction and fantasy paperbacks, all titles I'd read, of course. A second bookshelf by the bed was crammed to capacity with old computer magazines and Dungeons and Dragons rulebooks. Several long boxes of comic books were stacked against the wall, each carefully labeled, and there, on the battered wooden desk in the corner, was James Halliday's first computer. Like many home computers of its era, it was housed in the same case as its keyboard. TRS-80 Color Computer 2 16K RAM was printed on a label above the keys. Cables snaked out of the back of the machine, leading to an audio cassette recorder, a small color television, a dot matrix printer, and a 300 baud modem. A long list of telephone numbers for dial-up bulletin board services was taped to the desk beside the modem. I sat down and located the power switch for the computer and the TV. I heard a crackle of static, followed by a low hum as the TV warmed up. A moment later, the TRS-80's green startup screen appeared, and I saw these words: Extended Color Basic 1.1 Copyright 1982 by Tandy. Okay. Below this was a flashing cursor, cycling through every color of the spectrum. I typed hello and hit the enter key. Syntax error appeared on the next line. Hello was an invalid command in BASIC, the only language the ancient computer understood. I knew from my research that the cassette recorder functioned as a TRS-80's tape drive. It stored data as analog sound on magnetic audio tapes. When Halliday had first started programming, the poor kid hadn't even had access to a floppy disk drive. He had had to store his code on cassette tapes. A shoebox sat beside the tape drives, filled with dozens of these cassettes. Most of them were text adventure games: Rocket 2, Bedlam, Pyramid, and Madness and Minotaur. There were also a few ROM cartridges, which fit into a slot on the side of the computer. I dug around in the box until I found a cartridge with Dungeons of Daggerath printed in crooked yellow text on its worn red label. The game's artwork depicted a first-person view of a long dungeon corridor, blocked by a hulking blue giant with a large stone axe. When a list of games found in Halliday's bedroom had first appeared online, I'd made sure to download and master every single one of them, so I'd already solved Dungeons of Daggerath about 2 years earlier. Take most of it on a weekend. Graphics were crude, but even so, the game was fun, incredibly addictive. I knew from reading the message boards that during the past 5 years, several beaters had played and solved Dungeons and Daggerath right here on Halliday's TRS-80. Some had solved every single game in the shoebox just to see if anything would happen, and nothing had. But none of these beaters had been in possession of the copper key. My hands were trembling slightly as I powered off the TRS-80 and inserted the Dungeons of Daggerath cartridge. When I turned the computer back on, the screen flashed to black and a crude graphic of a wizard appeared, accompanied by some ominous sound effects. The wizard held a staff in one hand, and below him, printed in all capital letters, was the legend, "I dare ye enter the Dungeons of Daggerath." I laid my fingers on the keyboard and began to play. As soon as I did, a jam box sitting on top of Halliday's dresser turned itself on, and familiar music began to blast out of it. It was Basil Polduris' score for Conan the Barbarian. That must be Anorak's way of letting me know I'm on the right track, I thought. I quickly lost track of time. I forgot that my avatar was sitting in Halliday's bedroom and that, in reality, I was sitting in my hideout huddled near the electric heater, tapping at the empty air in front of me, entering commands on an imaginary keyboard. All the intervening layers slipped away, and I lost myself in the game within a game. In Dungeons of Daggerath, you control your avatar by typing commands like turn left or get torch, navigating your way through a maze of vector graphic corridors while fighting off spiders, stone giants, blobs, and wraiths as you descended deeper and deeper, working your way down through the dungeon's 5 increasingly difficult levels. It took a while for the commands and quirks of the game to come back to me, but once they did, the game wasn't that difficult to solve. The ability to save my place at any time basically gave me infinite lives, although saving and reloading the game from the tape drive proved to be a slow and tedious process. It often took several attempts and a lot of fiddling with the cassette deck's volume knob. Saving my game also allowed me to log up for bathroom breaks and to recharge my space heater. While I was playing, the Conan the Barbarian score ended, and the jam box clicked over and began to play the opposite side of the tape, treating me to the synthesizer-laden score for the Ladyhawke. I couldn't wait to rub H's nose in that. I reached the last level of the dungeon around 4 o'clock in the morning and faced off against the evil Wizard of Daggerath. After dying and reloading twice, I finally defeated him using an elvish sword and a ring of ice. I completed the game by picking up the wizard's magic ring, claiming it for myself. As I did, an image appeared on the screen showing a wizard with a bright star on his staff and his robes. The text below read, "Behold, destiny awaits the hand of a new wizard." I waited to see what would happen. For a moment, nothing did. Then Halliday's ancient dot matrix printer came to life and noisily ground out a single line of text. The tractor feed spooled the page out of the top of the printer. I tore the sheet off and read what was there. Congratulations! You have opened the first gate! I glanced around, saw that there was now a wrought iron gate embedded in the bedroom wall, in the exact spot where the War Games poster had been a second before. In the center of the gate was a copper-plated lock with a keyhole. I climbed up to the top of Halliday's desk so I could reach the lock, and then slid the copper key into the keyhole and turned it. The entire gate began to glow as if the metal had become superheated, and its double door swung inward, revealing a field of stars. It appeared to be a portal into deep space. My God, it's full of stars, I heard a disembodied voice say. I recognized it as a soundbite from the film 2010. Then I heard a low, ominous hum, followed by a piece of music from that film's score, also Sprach Zarathustra by Richard Strauss. I leaned forward and looked through the portal. Left and right, up and down, nothing but an endless field of stars in all directions. Squinting, I could make out a few tiny nebulae and galaxies in the distance. I didn't hesitate. I jumped into the open gate. It seemed to pull me in and I began to fall, but I fell forward instead of down, and the stars seemed to fall with me. Oh wait, that's where I should have paused. I found myself standing in an old video arcade, playing Galaga. The game was already in progress. I had double ships, a score of 41,780 points. I glanced down, saw my hands were on the controls. After a second or two of disorientation, I reflexively began to play, moving the joystick left just in time to avoid losing one of my ships. Keeping one eye on the game, I tried to make sense of my surroundings. In my peripheral vision, I was able to make out a Dig Dug game on my left and a Zaxxon machine on my right. Behind me, I could hear a cacophony of digital combat coming from dozens of other vintage arcade games. Then, as I finished clearing the wave on Galaga, I noticed my reflection in the game screen. It wasn't my avatar's face I saw there. It was Matthew Broderick's face, a young pre-Ferris Bueller and pre-Lady Hawk Matthew Broderick. Then I knew where I was and who I was. I was David Lightman, Matthew Broderick's character in the movie War Games, and this was his first scene in the film. I was in the movie. I took a quick glance around and saw a detailed replica of 20 Grand Palace, the combination arcade pizza joint featured in the film. Kids with feathered 80s hairstyles were clustered around each of the games. Others sat in booths eating pizza and drinking sodas. Video Fever by the Beepers blasted out of a jukebox in the corner. Everything looked and sounded exactly as it did in the movie. Halliday had created every last detail from the film and recreated it as an interactive simulation. As an aside, remember, who was it that said this is Ernest Cline's self-insert? Yeah, not only is this an self-insert, it's a self-insert into all these nostalgia movies, guys. Oh boy.
I'm having the time of my life listening to this.
It's so fucking stupid. Some of the ideas, okay, don't get me wrong, some of the ideas are pretty novel, but like, man, this writing's a little rough. Holy shit. I'd spent years wondering what challenges awaited me inside the first gate. Never once had I imagined this. But I probably should have. War Games had been one of Halliday's all-time favorite movies, which was why I had watched it over 36 times. Well, that, and it was also completely awesome, with an old-school teenage computer hacker as a protagonist, and it looked like all that research was about to pay off. Now, I heard a repetitive electronic beeping. It seemed to be coming out from the right pocket of the jeans I was wearing. Keeping my left hand on the joystick, I reached in my pocket and pulled out a digital watch. Readout said 7:45 a.m. When I pushed one of the buttons to silence the alarm, a warning flashed in the center of my display. David, you're going to be late for school. I used a voice command to pull up my Oasis map, hoping to learn where the gate had transported me. But it turned out that not only was I no longer in Middletown, I was No longer in the Oasis at all. My locator icon was in the middle of a blank screen, which means I was OTM, off the map. When I'd stepped into the gate, it had transported my avatar into a standalone simulation, a virtual location separated from the Oasis. It seemed that the only way I could get back would be to clear the game by completing the quest. But if this was a video game, how was I supposed to play it? If this was a quest, what was my goal? I continued to play Galaga while pondering these questions. A second later, a young boy walked into the arcade and came over to me. "Hi, David," he said, his eyes on my game. I recognized this kid from the movie. His name was Howie. In the film, Matthew Broderick's character hands his Galaga game off to Howie when he rushes off to school. "Hi, David," the boy repeated in the same exact tone. As he spoke this time, his words also appeared as text superimposed across the bottom of my display like subtitles. Below this flashing red were the words, "Final dialogue warning." I began to understand. The simulation was warning me that this was my final chance to deliver the next line of dialogue from the movie. If I didn't see the line, I could guess what would probably happen next. Game over. But I didn't panic because I knew the line. I'd seen War Games so many times that I knew the entire film by heart. "Hi, Howie," I said, but the voice I heard in my earphones was not my own. It was Matthew Broderick's voice. As I spoke the line, the warning on my display vanished and a score of 100 points appeared, superimposed at the top of my display. I racked my brain, trying to mentally replay the rest of the scene. The next line came to me. "How's it going?" I said, and my score jumped to 200 points. "Pretty good," Howie replied. I started to feel giddy. This was incredible. I was totally inside the movie. Halliday had transformed a 50-year-old film into a real-time interactive video game. I wondered how long it had taken him to program this thing. Another warning flashed on my display. "You're going to be late for school, David. Hurry!" I stepped away from the Galaga machine. "Hey, you want to take this over?" I asked Howie. "Sure," he replied, grabbing the controls. "Thanks." A green path appeared on the floor of the arcade, leading from where I stood to the exit. I started to follow it. Then I remembered to run back and grab my notebook off of the Dig Dug game, just like David had in the movie. As I did this, my score jumped another 100 points, and action bonus appeared on my display. "Bye, David," Howie shouted. "Bye," I shouted back, another 100 points. That was easy. I followed the green path out of 20 Grand Palace and up the busy street a few blocks. I was now running along a tree-side suburban street. I rounded a corner and saw that the path led directly to a large brick building. The sign over the door said Snohomish High School, David's school, and the setting of the next few scenes in the movie. My mind was racing as I ran inside. If all I had to do was rattle off lines of dialogue from War Games on cue for the next 2 hours, this was going to be a breeze. Without even knowing it, I totally over-prepared. I probably knew War Games even better than I knew Real Genius and Better Off Dead. As I ran down the empty school hallway, another warning flashed in front of me. "You're late for your biology class." I continued to sprint at top speed, following the green path, which was now pulsing brightly. It eventually led me to the door of a classroom on the second floor. Through the window, I could see that the class was already in session. The teacher was up at the board. I saw my seat, the only empty one in the room. It was right behind Ali Sheedy. I opened the door and tiptoed inside, but the teacher spotted me right away. "Ah, David, nice of you to join us." Making it all the way to the end of the movie wound up being a lot harder than I anticipated. It only took me about 15 minutes to figure out the rules of the game and to sort out how the scoring system worked. I was actually required to do a lot more than simply recite the dialogue. I also had to perform all the actions that Broderick's character performed in the film in the correct way and at the correct moment. It was like being forced to act the leading role in a play you'd watched many times but had never actually rehearsed. For most of the movie's first hour, I was on edge, constantly trying to think ahead to have my next line of dialogue ready. Whenever I flubbed a line or didn't perform an action at the right moment, my score decreased and a warning flashed on my display. When I made 2 mistakes in a row, a final warning message appeared. I wasn't sure what would happen if I got 3 strikes in a row, but my guess was that I'd either be expelled from the gate or that my avatar would simply be killed. I was eager to find out which that would be. Whenever I correctly performed 7 actions or recited 7 lines of dialogue in a row, the game would award me a cue card power up. The next time I blanked out on what to do or say, I could select the cue card icon, and the correct action or line of dialogue would appear on my display, sort of like a teleprompter. During scenes that didn't involve my character, the simulation cut to a passive third-person perspective, and all I had to do was sit back and watch things play out, sort of like watching a cutscene in an old video game. During these scenes, I could relax until my character came on screen again. During one of these breaks, I tried to access a copy of the movie from my Oasis console's hard drive with the intention of playing it in a window on my display so I could refer to it, but the system wouldn't let me. In fact, I found that I couldn't open any windows at all while inside the game. When I tried, I got a warning. No cheating. Try to cheat again, and it's game over. Luckily, turned out I didn't need any help. Once I'd collected the maximum of 5 cue card power-ups, I began to relax, and the game actually started to be fun. It wasn't hard to enjoy being inside one of my favorite flicks. After a while, I even discovered that I could earn bonus points by delivering a line in the exact tone and with the exact inflection as in the film. I didn't know at the time, but I'd just become the first person to play an entirely new type of video game when GSS got wind of the war game simulation inside the first gate, and they did a short time later. The company quickly patented the idea and began to buy out the rights to old movies and TV shows and converted them into immersive interactive games they dubbed FlickSyncs. FlickSyncs became widely popular. There turned out to be a huge market for games that allowed people to play a leading role in one of their favorite old movies or TV series. By the time I reached the final scenes of the movie, I was starting to get twitchy from exhaustion. I'd been up for over 24 hours straight, jacked in the entire time. The last action I had to perform was instructing the Whopper supercomputer to play itself at tic-tac-toe. Since every game the Whopper played ended in a tie, this had the improbable effect of teaching the artificially intelligent computer that Global Thermonuclear War 2 was a game in which the only winning move is not to play. This prevented the Whopper from launching all the United States' ICBMs at the Soviet Union. I, David Lightman, teenage computer geek from suburban Seattle, had single-handedly prevented the end of human civilization. The NORAD command center erupted in celebration, and I waited for the movie's end credits to roll, but they didn't. Instead, all the characters around me vanished, leaving me alone in the giant war room. When I checked my avatar's reflection in a computer monitor, I saw that I no longer looked like Matthew Broderick. I changed back into Parzival. I glanced around at the empty NORAD command center, wondering what I was supposed to do next. Then, all the giant video display screens in front of me went blank, and 4 lines of glowing green text appeared on them. It was another riddle. The captain conceals the jade key in a dwelling long neglected, but you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are all collected. I stood there for a second, staring at the words in stunned silence. Then, I snapped out of my daze and quickly took several screenshots of the text. As I was doing this, the copper gate reappeared, embedded in a nearby wall. The gate was open, and through it I could see Halliday's bedroom. It was an exit, the way out. I'd done it. I'd cleared the first gate. I glanced back up at the riddle on the view screens. It'd taken me years to decipher the limerick and locate the copper key. At first glance, this new riddle about the jade key looked like it might take just as long to figure out. I didn't understand a word of it, but I was also dead on my feet and in no condition for further puzzle solving. I could barely keep my eyes open. I jumped through the exit, landed with a thud on the floor of Halliday's bedroom. When I turned around and looked at the wall, I saw the gate was now gone and the War Games poster had reappeared in its place. I checked my avatar stats and saw I'd been awarded several 100,000 experience points for clearing the gate. Enough to raise my avatar from 10th level up to 20th level in one shot. Then I checked the scoreboard. Wait, He got 100,000. He got 100,000 points for RPing through a movie.
Bro.
You know, back in my day, you couldn't get this kind of XP in my Korean MMORPGs. This is bullshit. This is horse shit. My score had increased by 100,000 points, and a copper-colored gate icon now appeared beside it. The media and everyone else had probably been monitoring the scoreboard since last night, so now the whole world would know that I'd cleared the first gate. I was too exhausted to consider the implications. All I could think about was sleep. I ran downstairs and into the kitchen. The keys to the Halliday family car were on a pegboard next to the refrigerator. I grabbed them and rushed outside. The car, the one that wasn't on the blocks, was a 1982 Ford Thunderbird. The engine started on the second try. I backed out of the driveway and drove to the bus station. From there, I teleported back to the transport terminal next to my school on Ludus. Then I went to my locker, dumped all my avatar's newfound treasure, armor, and weapons inside before finally logging out of the oasis. When I pulled off my visor, it was 6:17 a.m. I rubbed my bloodshot eyes and gazed around the dark interior of my hideout, trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. I suddenly realized how cold it was in the van. I'd been using the tiny space heater off and on all night, and it drained the batteries. I was way too tired to get on the exercise bike and recharge them, and I didn't have the energy to make the trek back to my onset trailer either. But the sun would be up soon, so I knew I could crash there in my hideout without worrying I would freeze to death. I slid off my chair and onto the floor, and then curled up in my sleeping bag. As I closed my eyes, I began to ponder the riddle of the jade key, but sleep swallowed me whole a few seconds later. I had a dream. I was standing alone in the center of a scorched battlefield with several different armies arrayed against me. An army of Sixers stood in front of me, and several different beater clans surrounded me on all of their flanks, brandishing swords and guns and weapons of powerful magic. I looked down on my body. It wasn't Parzival's body, it was my own, and I was wearing armor made of paper. In my right hand was a toy plastic sword, and in my left was a large glass egg. It looked exactly like the glass egg that causes Tom Cruise's character so much grief and risky business, but somehow I knew that in the context of my dream, it was supposed to be Halliday's Easter egg. And I was standing there, out in the open, holding it for all the world to see. In unison, the armies of my enemies let out a fierce battle cry and charged toward me. They converged on my position with bared teeth and blood in their eyes. They were coming up to take the egg, and there was nothing I could do to stop them. I knew I was dreaming, so I expected to wake up before they reached me, but I didn't. The dream continued as the egg was ripped from my grasp, and I felt myself being torn to shreds. Damn, he's got some issues. I slept for over 12 hours and missed school entirely. When I finally woke up, I rubbed my eyes and lay there in silence a while, trying to convince myself that the events of the previous day had actually occurred. It all seems like a dream to me now, far too good to be real. Eventually, I grabbed my visor and got online to find out for sure. Every single every single news feed seemed to be showing a screenshot of the scoreboard, and my avatar's name was there at the top in first place. R3 Miss was still in second place, but the score beside her name had now increased to 109,000, just 1,000 points less than mine. And like me, she had a copper-colored gate icon beside her score now too, so she'd done it. While I slept, she deciphered the inscription on the copper key. Then she'd gone to Middletown, located the gate, and made it all the way through War Games just a few hours after I had. I no longer felt quite so impressed with myself. I slipped past a few more channels before stopping on one of the major newsfeed networks, where I saw two men sitting in front of a screenshot of the scoreboard. The man on the left, some middle-aged intellectual type billed as Edgar Nash, beater expert, appeared to be explaining the scores to the newsfeed anchor beside him. Appears that the avatar named Parzival received a slightly more points for being the first to find the copper key, Nash said, pointing to the scoreboard. Then, early this morning, Parzival's score increased another 100,000 points, and a copper gate icon appeared beside his score. The same change occurred to Arthurimus' score a few hours later. This seems to indicate that both of them have now completed the first of the 3 gates. The famous 3 gates that James Halliday spoke of in the Anorak's invitation video? The anchor said, the very same. But Mr. Nash, in 5 years, how is it that 2 avatars accomplished this feat on the same day, within just a few hours of each other? Well, I think there's one plausible answer. These 2 people, Parzival and Arthurimus, must be working together. They're probably both members of what is known as a beater clan. These are groups of egg hunters who... I frowned and changed the channel, surfing the feeds until I saw an overly enthusiastic reporter interviewing Ogden Morrow via satellite. The Ogden Morrow. Joining us live from his home in Oregon. Thanks for being with us today, Mr. Morrow. No problem, Morrow replied. It had been almost 6 years since Morrow had last spoken to the media, but he didn't seem to have aged a day. His wild gray hair and long beard made him seem made him seem like a cross between Albert Einstein and Santa Claus. That comparison was also a pretty good description of his personality. The reporter cleared his throat, obviously a bit nervous. Let me start off by asking what your reaction is to the events of the last 24 hours. Were you surprised to see those names appear on Halliday's scoreboard? Surprised? Yes, a little, I suppose, but excited is probably a better word. Like everyone else, I've been watching and waiting for this to happen. Of course, I wasn't sure if I'd be alive when it finally did. I'm glad I am. It's all very exciting, isn't it? Do you think these 2 Gunters, Parzival and Arthurimus, are working together? I have no idea. I suppose it's possible. As you know, Gregarious Simulation Systems keeps all Oasis user records confidential, so we have no way of knowing their true identities. Do you think either of them will come forward and reveal themselves to the public? Not if they're smart, they won't, Morrow said, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. If I were in their shoes, I'd do everything possible to remain anonymous. Why do you say that? Because once the world discovers who they really are, they'll never have a moment's peace afterward. If people think you can help them find Halliday's egg, they'll never leave you alone. Trust me, I know that from experience. Yes, I suppose you do, the reporter flashed a fake smile. However, this network has contacted both Parzival and Arthurimus via email, and we've extended generous monetary offers to each of them in return for an exclusive interview, either in the Oasis or here in the real world. I'm sure they're receiving many such offers, but I doubt they'll accept, Morrow said. Then he looked straight into the camera, and I felt as if he were now speaking directly to me. Anyone smart enough to accomplish what they should know better than to risk everything by talking to the vultures in the media. The reporter chuckled uncomfortably. Ha ha. Mr. Morrow, I really don't think that's called for. Morrow shrugged. Too bad. I do. The reporter cleared his throat again. Well, moving on, do you have any predictions about what changes we might see on the scoreboard in the weeks to come? I'm betting that those other 8 empty slots will fill up pretty quickly. What makes you think so? 1 person can keep a secret, but not 2, he replied, staring directly into the camera again. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But I am sure of one thing. The Sixers are going to use every dirty trick at their disposal to learn the location of the copper key and the first gate. You're referring to the employees of the Innovated Online Industries? Yes, IOI, the Sixers. Their sole purpose is to exploit loopholes in the contest rules and subvert the intention of Jim's will. The very soul of the Oasis is at stake here. The last thing Jim would have wanted is for his creation to fall in the hands of a fascist multinational conglomerate like IOI. Mr. Morrow, IOI owns this network. Of course they do, Morrow shouted gleeful. They own practically everything, including you, pretty boy. I mean, did they tattoo a UPC code on your ass when they hired you to sit there and spout their corpo bullshit? The reporter began to stutter, glancing nervously at something off camera. Quick, Morrow said, you better cut me off before I say anything else. Ha ha! He broke into gales of laughter just as the network cut his satellite feed. The reporter took a few seconds to regroup, then said, thank you for joining us, Mr. Morrow. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have to speak with him. Now let's go back to Judy, who is standing by with a panel of renowned Halliday scholars. I smiled and closed the vid feed, pondering the old man's advice. I'd always suspected that Morrow knew more about the contest than he was letting on. Morrow and Halliday had grown up together, founded a company together, and changed the world together. But Morrow had led a very different life from Halliday's, one involving a much greater connection to humanity and a great deal more tragedy. During the mid-90s, back when Gregarious Simulation Systems was still just Gregarious Games, Morrow had moved in with his high school sweetheart, Kira Underwood. Kira was born and raised in London. Her birth name was Karen, but she I fucking hate these weeaboos! But she'd insisted on being called Kira ever since her first viewing of The Dark Crystal. Morrow met her when she spent her junior year as an exchange student at his high school. In his autobiography, Morrow wrote that she was the quintessential geek girl, unabashedly obsessed with Monty Python, comic books, fantasy novels, and video games. She and Morrow shared a few classes at school, and he was smitten with her almost immediately. He invited her to attend his weekly Dungeons and Dragons gaming sessions, just as he'd done with Halliday a few years earlier. And to his surprise, she accepted. She became the lone female in our weekly gaming group, Morrow wrote. And every single one of the guys developed a massive crush on her, including Jim. She was actually the one who gave him the nickname Anorak, a British slang term for an obsessive geek. I think Jim adopted it as the name of his D&D character to impress her. Or maybe it was his way of trying to let her know he was in on the joke. The opposite sex made Jim extremely nervous, and Kira was the only girl I saw him speak to in a relaxed manner. But even then, it was only as in character, as Anorak during the course of our gaming sessions, and he would only address her as Lukosha, the name of her D&D character. Jesus fucking Christ, man. Holy shit. I need a moment for this. And hello, everybody in the stream.
I'm fucking cringy.
I'm fucking dying. Ogden and Kira began dating. But by the end of the school year, when it was time for her to return home to London, the two of them had openly declared their love for each other. They kept in touch during their remaining year of school by emailing every day using an early pre-internet computer bulletin board network called FidoNet. When they both graduated from high school, Kira returned to the States, moved in with Morrow, and became one of Gregarious Games' first employees. For the first 2 years, she was their entire art department. They got engaged a few years later after the launch of Oasis. They were married a year later, at which time Kira resigned from her position as an artistic director at GSS. She was a millionaire now too, thanks to her company stock options. Morrow stayed on at the GSS for 5 more years. Then, in the summer of 2022... Hold up. We just lived history. Whoa.
Bro, where's our Oasis?
Play Wonderwall. He announced he was leaving the company. At the time, he claimed it was for personal reasons. But years later, Morrow wrote in his autobiography that he left GSS because we were no longer in the video game business. And because he felt that the oasis had evolved into something horrible, it had become a self-imposed prison for humanity, he wrote, a pleasant place for the world to hide from its problems while human civilization slowly collapses, primarily due to neglect. Rumors also surfaced that Morrow had chosen to leave because he'd had a huge falling out with Halliday. Neither of them would confirm or deny these rumors, and no one seemed to know what sort of dispute had ended their long friendship. But sources within the company said that at the time of Morrow's resignation, he and Halliday had not spoken to each other directly in several years. Even so, when Morrow left GSS, he sold his entire share of the company directly to Halliday for an undisclosed sum. Ogden and Kira retired to their home in Oregon and started a non-profit educational software company, Halcydonia Interactive, which created free interactive adventure games for kids. I'd grown up playing these games, all of which were set in the magical kingdom of Halcydonia. Morrow's games had transported me out of my grim surroundings as a lonely kid growing up in the stacks. They'd also taught me how to do math and solve puzzles while building my while building my self-esteem. In a way, the Morrows were among my very first teachers. For the next decade, Ogden and Kira enjoyed a peaceful, happy existence, living and working in relative seclusion. They tried to have children, but it wasn't in the cards for them. They'd begun to consider adoption when, in the winter of 2034, Kira was killed in a car accident on an icy mountain road just a few miles from their home. After that, Ogden continued to run Halcydonia Interactive on his own. He managed to stay out of the limelight until the morning of Halliday's death, when his home was besieged by the media. As Halliday's former closest friend, everyone assumed he alone could explain why the deceased billionaire had put his entire fortune up for grabs. Morrow eventually held a press conference just to get everyone off his back. It was the last time he'd spoken to the media until today. I'd watched the video of that press conference many, many times. Morrow had begun it by reading a brief statement stating that he hadn't seen or spoken to Halliday in over a decade. "We had a falling out," he said, "and that is something I refuse to discuss now or in the future. Suffice it to say, I have not communicated with James Halliday in over 10 years. Then, why did Halliday leave you his vast collection of classic coin-operated video games?" the reporter asked. "All of his other material possessions are to be auctioned off. If you were no longer friends, why are you the only person he left anything to?" "I have no idea," Morrow said simply. Another reporter asked Morrow if he planned on looking for Halliday's Easter egg himself, since he'd known Halliday so well and would therefore probably have a better chance than anyone of finding it. Morrow reminded the reporter that the contest rules laid out in Halliday's will stated that no one who had ever worked for Gregarious Simulation Systems or anyone in their immediate families was eligible to take part in the contest. "Did you have any idea what Halliday's working on all those years he was in seclusion?" another reporter asked. "No, I suspected he might be working on some new game. Jim was always working on a new game. For him, making games was as necessary as breathing. But I never imagined he was planning something of this magnitude." As a person who knew James Halliday the best, do you have any advice for the millions of people who are now searching for his Easter egg? Where do you think people should start looking for it? "I think Jim made that pretty obvious," Morrow replied, tapping a finger against his temple, just as Halliday had in his Anorak's invitation video. "Jim always wanted everyone to share his obsessions, to love the same things he did. I think this contest is his way of giving the entire world an incentive to do just that." I closed my file on Morrow and checked my email. The system informed me that I had received over 2 million new unsolicited messages. Only 2 messages were left These were automatically sorted in a separate folder, so I could sort through them later. Only 2 new messages were left in my inbox from people on my authorized contact list. One was from H. The other was from Artemis. I opened H's message first. It was a vid mail, and his avatar's face appeared in a window. Holy shit, he shouted. I don't believe this. Now you've cleared the motherfucking first gate, and you still haven't phoned me? Call my ass now, the second you get this. I considered waiting a few days to call H back, but quickly abandoned the idea. I needed to talk to someone about all this, and H was my best friend. If there was anyone I could trust, it was him. He picked up on the first ring, and his avatar appeared in a new window in front of me. You dog! He shouted, you brilliant, sly, devious dog! Hey, H, I said, trying to deadpan it. What's new? What's new? What's new? You mean other than seeing my best friend's name appear at the top of the scoreboard? Other than that, you mean? He leaned forward so that his mouth completely filled the vid feed window and shouted, other than that, not much! Not much new at all! I laughed. Sorry it took me a while to call you. I had kind of a late night. No shit you had a late night, he said. Look at you. How can you be so calm? Don't you realize what this means? This is huge. This is beyond epic. I mean, congratulations, man. He began to bow repeatedly. I am not worthy. Yo, cut it out, okay? It's not really that big of a deal. I haven't actually won anything yet. Not a big deal, he cried. Not a big deal? Are you kidding me? You're a legend now, man. You became the first beater in history to find the copper key and clear the first gate. You are a god from this moment forth. Do you not realize this, fool? Seriously, stop it. I'm already freaked out enough as it is. Have you seen the news? The whole world is freaking out, and the beater boards are going apeshit, and everyone is talking about you, amigo. I know. Listen, I hope you're not pissed at me for keeping you in the dark. I felt really weird about not returning your calls or telling you what I was up to. Oh, come on, he rolled his eyes dismissively. You know damn well that if I had been in your shoes, I would have done the same thing. That's how the game is played, but his tone grew serious. I am curious to know how that R3 chick happened to find the copper key and clear the game right after you did. Everyone seems to think you two were working together, but I know that's horseshit. So what happened? Was she following you or something? I shook my head. No. She found the key's hiding place before I did. Last month, she said. She just wasn't able to obtain the key until now. I was silent for a second. I can't really go into the details without, H held up both hands. No worries. I totally understand. I wouldn't want you to accidentally drop any hints. He flashed his trademark Cheshire grin, and his gleaming white teeth seemed to take up half of the vid feed window. Actually, I should let you know where I am right now. He adjusted his vid feed's virtual camera so that it pulled back from a tight shot of his face to a much wider shot that revealed where he was. Standing next to the flat-topped hill just outside the entrance to the Tomb of Horrors. My jaw dropped. How in the hell? Well, when I first saw your name all over the news feeds last night, it occurred to me that for as long as I've known you, you've never had the dough to do much traveling. Any traveling, really. So I figured if you had found the hiding place of the copper key, it probably had to be somewhere close to Ludus, or maybe even on Ludus. Well done, I said, and I meant it. Not really. I spent hours racking my pea-sized brain before I finally thought to search the map of Ludus for the surface features described in the Tomb of Horrors module. But once I did, everything else clicked into place. And here I am. Congratulations! Yeah, well, it was pretty easy once you pointed me in the right direction. He glanced back over his shoulder at the tomb. I've been searching for this place for years, and all this time it was within walking distance of my school. I feel like a total moron for not figuring it out on my own. You're not a moron, I said. You deciphered the limerick on your own. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know about the Tomb of Horrors module, right? So you're not pissed? He said. That I took advantage of my inside info? I shook my head. No way! I would have done the same thing. Well, regardless, I owe you one, and I won't forget it. I nodded toward the tomb behind him. Have you been inside yet? Yeah, I came back up here to call you while I wait for the server to reset at midnight. The tomb is empty right now because your friend Arthur already blew through here earlier today. We're not friends, I said. She just showed up a few minutes before I got the key. Did you guys throw down? No, the tomb is a no PvP zone. I glanced at the time. Looks like you've still got a few hours to kill before the reset. Yeah, I've been studying the original D&D module trying to prepare myself, he said. Want to give me any tips? I grinned. No, not really. Didn't think so. He was silent for a few seconds. Listen, I have something to ask you. I have to ask you something, he said. Does anyone know your avatar's name? No. I've been careful to keep it a secret. No one there knows me as Parzival. Not even the teachers. Good, he said. I took the same precaution. Unfortunately, several beaters who frequent the basement know that we both attend school on Ludus, so they might be able to connect the dots. I'm worried about that one in particular. I felt a rush of panic. Iraq? H nodded. He's been calling me nonstop since your name appeared on the scoreboard, asking what I knew. I played dumb, and he seemed to buy it. But if my name shows up on the scoreboard too, you can bet he'll start bragging that he knows this. And when he starts telling other beaters that you and I are both students on Ludus, shit, I cursed, then every gunter in the sim will be headed here and search for the copper key. Right, H said, and before long, the location of the tomb will be common knowledge. I sighed. Well, then you better get the key before that happens. I'll do my best. He held up a copy of the Tomb of Horrors module. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to reread this thing for the 100th time today. Good luck, H, I said. Give me a call once you've cleared the gate. If I clear the gate. You will, I said. And when you do, we should meet in the basement to talk. You got it, amigo. He waved to goodbye, and I was about to end the call when I spoke up. Hey, H? Yeah. You might want to brush up on your jousting skills, I said. You know, between now and midnight. He looked puzzled for a moment. Then a smile of understanding spread across his face. I gotcha, he said. Thanks, pal. Good luck. As his feed window winked out, I found myself wondering how H and I would remain friends through everything that lay ahead. Neither of us wanted to work as a team, so from here on out, we would be in direct competition with each other. Would I eventually regret helping him today? Or come to resent that I'd unwittingly led him to the Copper Key's hiding place? I pushed these thoughts aside and opened the email from Arthurimus. It was an old-fashioned text message. Dear Parzival, congrats! See, you're famous now, just like I said. Although it looks like we've both been thrust into the limelight. Kinda scary, eh? Thanks for the tip about playing on the left side. You were right. Somehow that did the trick. But don't go thinking I owe you any favors, mister. Smiley face. The first gate was pretty wild, wasn't it? Not at all what I expected. It would have been cool if Halliday had given me the option to play Ali Sheedy instead. But what can you do? This new riddle is a real head scratcher, isn't it? I hope it doesn't take us another 5 years to decipher it. Anyhow, just wanted to say it was an honor to meet you. I hope our paths cross again soon. Sincerely, Arthurimus. P.S. Enjoy being number one while you can, pal. It won't last for long. I reread her message several times, grinning like a dopey schoolboy. Then I typed out my reply. Dear Artemis, congratulations to you too. You weren't kidding. Competition clearly brings out the best in you. You're welcome for the tip about playing on the left. You totally owe me a favor now. Winky face. The new riddle is a cinch. I think I've already got it figured out, actually. What's the holdup on your end? It was an honor to meet you too. If you ever feel like hanging out in a chat room, let me know. Monday to Friday, bitch, where you at? Parzival. Yes. You challenging me? Are you challenging me? Bring the pain, woman.
What's up? Fuck.
After rewriting it a few dozen times, I tapped the send button. Then I pulled up my screenshot of the Jade Key riddle and began to study it syllable by syllable. But I couldn't seem to concentrate. No matter how hard I tried to focus, my mind just kept drifting back to Artemis.
That was the best he could do.
Dude.
24
Look, Monday
24
to
rewrites.
Friday. Monday to Friday, bitch, where you at?
What the fuck?
Oh my god.
Yo, I had to think of that. I had to think that one up on the spot. NTFBWY. Okay, so where you? That's where you at.
Are you sure?
Yeah, but where you at? It should be something. But where you at? I feel like that's what the acronym should be. It's Monday to Friday, bitch. Where you at? That's what it is from
What?
now. That's canonized now. If you ever see that again, it's Monday to Friday, bitch. Where you at? That's the official canon. Nobody can convince me otherwise.
Urban Dictionary says, "May the force be with you always."
That sounds like shit compared
Oh,
to
that's
that sounds so
oh my
fucking stupid. No.
God.
My one was better. My one was clearly better.
I'm so upset right now.
It wasn't that. You guys can erase it from your brains. It's Monday to Friday, bitch. Where you at? Come
You're
on.
giving him way too much credit.
No. It's Monday to Friday, bitch. Where you at? That's what it is now. That's what it is now. We will erase the fact that it was a Star Wars reference. It never happened. Never happened.
Alright, on that happy note, good night.
Oh, night. H cleared the first gate early the next day. His name appeared on the scoreboard in third place with a score of 108,000 points. The value of obtaining the copper key had dropped another 1,000 points for him, but the value of clearing the first gate remained unchanged at 100,000. I returned to school on Monday morning. I considered calling in sick, but was concerned that my absence might raise suspicions. When I got there, I realized I shouldn't have worried. Due to the sudden renewed interest in the hunt, over half of the student body and quite a few of the teachers didn't bother showing up. Since everyone at school knew my avatar by the name Wade 3, no one paid any attention to me. Roaming the halls unnoticed, I decided that I enjoyed having a secret identity. It made me feel like Clark Kent or Peter. Wait a minute. Didn't they use the same joke like in the beginning when he was explaining his name? I fucking hate
Yes,
this. I
the
fucking hate
exact
this.
same one.
I fucking hate this. I thought my dad probably would have gotten a kick out of that. That afternoon, Iraq sent emails to H and me attempting to blackmail us. He said that if we didn't tell him how to find the copper key in the first gate, he would post what he knew about us to every beater message board he could find. When we refused, he made good on his threat and began telling everyone who would listen that H and I were both students on Ludus. Of course, he had no way of proving he really knew us, and by that time there were hundreds of other beaters claiming to be our close personal friends. So H and I were hoping his post would go unnoticed. But they didn't. Of course. At least two other gunters were sharp enough to connect the dots between Ludus, the Limerick, and the Tomb of Horrors. The day after Iraq left the cat out of the bag, the name Dido appeared in the fourth slot on the scoreboard. Then, less than 15 minutes later, the name Shoto appeared in the fifth slot. Somehow, they both obtained a copy of the copper key on the same day, without waiting for the server to reset at midnight. Then, a few hours later, both Dido and Shoto cleared the first gate. No one had ever heard of these avatars before, but their names seemed to indicate that they were working together, either as a duo or as part of a clan. Shoto and Dido were the Japanese names for the short and long swords worn by samurai. When worn as a set, the two swords were called Daisho, and this quickly became the nickname by which the two of them were known. Only 4 days had passed. You know, in retrospect, that's fucking J.K. Rowling naming her Asian student Cho Chang. That's how fucking
Oh
basic
my
this shit is.
Fucking god.
This
Cho
is the Cho Chang of Ready Player One. Make sure you guys know this. This will be important later.
white people trying to name Asians.
Look. At least he didn't try and drop a plate and name the person the sound. Only 4 days had passed since my name had first appeared on the scoreboard, and one new name had appeared below mine each subsequent day. The secret was out now, and the hunt seemed to be shifting into high gear. All week, I was unable to focus on anything my teachers were saying. Luckily, I only had 2 months of school left, and I'd already earned enough credits to graduate, even if I coasted from here on out. So I drifted from one class to the next in a daze, puzzling over the Jade Key riddle, reciting it over and over in my mind. The captain conceals the Jade Key in a dwelling long neglected, but you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are all collected. Hey Yoko, you'll enjoy this part. According to my English lit textbook, a poem with 4 lines of text and an alternate line rhyme scheme was known as a quatrain. So that became my nickname for the riddle. Each night after school, I logged out of the Oasis and filled the blank pages of my Grail diary with possible interpretations of the quatrain. What captain was Anorak talking about? Captain Kangaroo? Captain America? Captain Buck Rogers in the 25th century? And where in the hell was this dwelling long neglected? That part of the clue seemed maddeningly non-specific. Halliday's boyhood home on Middletown couldn't really be classified as neglected, but maybe he was talking about a different house in his hometown? That seemed too easy and too close to the hiding place of the Copper Key. At first, Tim Wang at least, true. At first, I thought that the neglected dwelling might be a reference to Revenge of the Nerds, one of Halliday's favorite films. In that movie, the nerds of the title rent a dilapidated house and fix it up during a classic 80s music montage. I visited a recreation of the Revenge of the Nerds house on the planet Skolnick and spent a day searching it, but it proved to be a dead end. The last 2 lines of the quatrain were also a complete mystery. They seemed to say that once you found the neglected dwelling, you would have to collect a bunch of trophies and then blow some kind of whistle. Or did that line mean blow the whistle in the colloquial sense, as in reveal a secret or alert someone to a crime? Either way, it didn't make any sense to me. But I continued to go over each line, word by word, until my brain began to feel like Aquafresh toothpaste. That Friday, after school, the day Dido and Shoto cleared the first gate, I was sitting in a secluded spot a few miles from my school, a steep hill with a solitary tree at the top. I like to come here to read, to do my homework, or to simply enjoy the view of the surrounding green fields. I didn't have access to that kind of view in the real world. As I sat under the tree, I sorted through the millions of messages still clogging my inbox. I'd been sifting through them all week. I'd received notes from people all over the globe, letters of congratulations, pleas for help, death threats, interview requests, several long, incoherent diatribes from beaters whose quest for the egg had clearly driven them insane. I'd also received invitations to join 4 of the biggest beater clans: Oviraptors, the Clan Destiny, the Keymasters, and Team Banzai. I told each of them thanks, but no thanks. When I got tired of reading my fan mail, I sorted out all the messages that were tagged as business related and began reading through those. I discovered that I'd received several offers from movie studios and book publishers, all interested in buying the rights to my life story. I deleted them all because I decided never to reveal my true identity to the world, at least not until after I found the egg. I'd also received several endorsement deal offers from companies who wanted to use Parzival's name and face to sell their services and products. An electronics retailer was interested in using my avatar to promote their line of Oasis immersion software so that they could sell Parzival-approved haptic rigs, gloves, and visors. I also had offers from a pizza delivery chain, a shoe manufacturer, and an online store that sold custom avatar skins. There was even a toy company that wanted to manufacture a line of Parzival lunchboxes and action figures. These companies were offering to pay me in Oasis credits, which could be transferred directly to my avatar's account. Couldn't believe my luck. I replied to every single one of these endorsement inquiries saying that I would accept their offers under the following conditions. I wouldn't have to reveal my true identity, and I would only do business through my Oasis avatar. This guy fucking retarded. He's like an 18-year-old kid trying to negotiate deals with companies. That doesn't fucking work. Look, okay, the selling out part, no, that's no big deal. Selling out, I do that in a heartbeat. What are you kidding? I'd sell out in a heartbeat. Are you kidding? I would sell out and be a shill immediately. But him negotiating with businesses. That's fucking stupid. That's fucking stupid. Honestly, that's the dumbest thing he could actually do. Try and negotiate on his own terms. That's actually so fucking stupid. That's so fucking stupid. I started receiving replies within the hour with contracts attached. I couldn't afford to have a lawyer look over them, but they all expired within a year's time, so I just went ahead and...
What the fuck is wrong with this guy?
Oh my god.
He's just fucking blindly signing them.
Yo, I would have been this could have been the human centipede episode of South Park. That's what this should have been. So I just went ahead and signed them electronically and emailed them back along with a 3-dimensional model of my avatar to be used for the commercials. I also received requests for an audio clip of my avatar's voice, so I sent them a synthesized clip of a deep baritone that made me sound like one of those guys who did voiceovers for movie trailers. Once they received everything, my avatar's new sponsors informed me that they'd wire my first round of payments to my Oasis account within the next 48 hours. The amount of money I was going to receive wouldn't be enough to make me rich. Not by a long shot. But to a kid who had grown up with nothing, it seemed like a fortune. I did some quick calculations. If I lived frugally, I would have enough to move out of the stacks and rent a small efficiency apartment somewhere, for a year at least. The very thought filled me with nervous excitement. I dreamed of escaping the stacks for as long as I could remember, and now it appeared that dream was about to become true. With the endorsement deals taken care of, I continued to sort through my email messages. When I sorted through the remaining messages by sender, I discovered I'd received over 500,000 emails from Innovative Online Industries. Actually, they'd sent me 5,000 copies of the same email. They've been resending the same message all week since my first name first appeared on the scoreboard, and they were still resending it once every minute. The Sixers were mail bombing me to make sure they got my attention. The emails were all marked maximum priority with the subject line, urgent business proposition. Please read immediately. The second I opened one, a delivery confirmation was sent back to IOI, letting them know I was finally reading their message. After that, they finally stopped resending it. Dear Parzival, first, allow me to congratulate you on your recent accomplishments, which we at Innovative Online Industries hold in the highest regard. On behalf of IOI, I wish to make you a highly lucrative business proposition, the exact details of which we can discuss in a private chat link session. Please use the attached contact card to reach me at your earliest convenience, regardless of the day or hour. Given our reputation within the beater community, I would understand if you were hesitant to speak with me. However, please be aware that if you choose not to accept our proposal, we intend to approach each of your competitors. At the very least, we'll hope you'll do us the honor of being the first to hear our generous offer. What have you got to lose? Thank you for your kind attention. I look forward to speaking with you. Sincerely, Nolan Sorrento, Head of Operations, Innovative Online Industries. Despite the message's reasonable tone, the threat behind it was crystal clear. The Sixers wanted to recruit me, or they wanted to pay me to tell them how to find the copper key and clear the first gate. And if I refused, they would go after Arthremus, then H, then Dido, Shoto, and every other beater who managed to get their name up on the scoreboard. These shameless corpo sleazebags wouldn't stop until they found someone dumb enough or desperate enough to give in and sell them the information they needed. My first impulse was to delete every single copy of the email and pretend I never received it. But I changed my mind. I wanted to know exactly what IOI was going to offer, and I couldn't pass up the chance to meet Nolan Sorrento, the Sixers' famous leader. There was no danger of meeting with him via chatting as long as I was careful about what I said. I considered teleporting to Incipio before my interview to buy a new skin for my avatar, maybe a tailored suit, something flashy, expensive, but then I thought better of it. I had nothing to prove to that corpo asshat. After all, I was famous now. I would roll into the meeting wearing my default skin and a fuck off attitude. I would listen to the offer, then tell them to kiss my simulated ass. Maybe I'd record the whole thing, post it on YouTube. I prepped for the meeting by pulling up a search engine and learning everything I could about Nolan Sorrento. He had a PhD in computer science. Wait. He had a PhD in computer science. Prior to becoming head of operations at IOI, he'd been a high-profile game designer, overseeing the creation of several third-party RPGs that ran inside the Oasis. I played all of his games. They're actually pretty good. He'd been a decent coder back before he sold his soul. It was obvious why IOI had hired him to lead their lackeys. They figured a game designer would have the best... Okay, hold on. Computer science isn't game design. The fuck is your problem? They're similar, but they're not the same. The fuck is this guy's problem? They figured a game designer would have the best chance of solving Halliday's grand video game puzzle, but Sorrento and the Sixers... No, I'm not a comp sci major. Had been at it for over 5 years and still had nothing to show for their efforts. And now that Gunter avatar name... Well, shit. And now that beater avatar names were appearing on the scoreboard left and right, the IOI brass had to be freaking out. Sorrento was probably catching all kinds of heat from his superiors. Ruru, don't say that. That's cursed. I wondered if it had been Sorrento's idea to recruit me, or if he had been ordered to do it. Once I'd done my homework on Sorrento, I felt like I was ready to sit down with the devil. I pulled up the contact card and attached Sorrento's email and tapped the chat link invitation icon at the bottom. Oh, this can't possibly go wrong, right? This can't possibly go wrong, right? Sorry. As I finished connecting to the chat link session, my avatar materialized on a grand observation deck with a stunning view of over a dozen Oasis worlds suspended in black space beyond the curved window. I appeared to be on a space station or a very large transport ship. I couldn't tell which. Chatlink sessions worked differently from chat rooms, and they were a lot more expensive to host. When you opened a chat link, an unsubstantial copy of your avatar was projected into another Oasis location. Your avatar wasn't actually there, and so it appeared to other avatars as a slightly transparent apparition. But you could still interact with the environment in a limited way, walking through doors, sitting in chairs, and so forth. Chat links were primarily used for business purposes. When a company wanted to host a meeting in a specific Oasis location without spending the time and money to transport everyone's avatars to it, this was the first time I'd ever used it. I turned around, saw that my avatar was standing in front of a C-shaped reception desk. The IOI corporate logo, giant overlapping chrome letters 20 feet tall, floated above it. As I approached the desk, an impossibly beautiful blonde receptionist stood to greet me. Mr. Parzival, she said, bowing slightly, welcome to Innovative Online Industries. Just a moment. Mr. Sorrento is already on his way to greet you. I wasn't sure how that could be, since I hadn't warned them that I was coming. While I waited, I tried to activate my avatar's vid feed recorder, but IOI had disabled recording in this chatling session. They obviously didn't want me to have video evidence of what was about to go down. So much for my plan to post the interview on YouTube. Less than a minute later, another avatar appeared through a set of automatic doors on the opposite side of the observation deck. He headed right for me, boots clicking on the polished floor. It was Sorrento. I recognized him because he wasn't using a standard issue Sixer avatar, one of the perks of his position. His avatar's face matched the photos of him I'd seen online. Blonde hair, brown eyes, hawkish nose. He did wear the standard Sixer uniform, navy blue bodysuit with gold epaulets at the shoulders and a silver IOI logo on his right breast with his employee number printed beneath it. 65532. Are you kidding me? Fuck you, book. Fuck you, Ernest Klein. What the fuck? What a fucking hack. At last, he said as he walked up, grinning like a jackal, the famous Parzival has graced us with his presence. He extended a gloved right hand. Nolan Sorrento, Chief of Operations, it's an honor to meet you. Yeah, I said, doing my best to sound aloof. Likewise, I guess. Even as a chatling projection, my avatar could still mime shaking his outstretched hand. I just stared down at it as if he were offering me a dead rat. He dropped it after a few seconds, but his smile didn't falter. It broadened. Please, follow me. He led me across the deck and back through the automatic doors, which slid to reveal a large launching bay. It contained a single interplanetary shuttlecraft emblazoned with the IOI logo. Sorrento began to board it, but I halted at the foot of the ramp. Why bother bringing me here via chat link? I asked, motioning to the bay around us. Why not just give me your sales pitch in a chat room? Please, indulge me, he said. This chat link is part of the sales pitch. We want to give you the same experience you'd have if you'd come to visit our headquarters in person. Right, I thought. If I'd come here in person, my avatar would be surrounded by thousands of Sixers and I'd be at your mercy. I turned him inside the shuttle. The ramp retracted and we launched out of the bay. Through the ship's wraparound windows, I saw that we were leaving one of the Sixer's orbital space stations. Looming directly ahead of us was the planet IOI-1, a massive chrome globe. It reminded me of the killer's floating spheres in the Phantasm films. Beaters referred to IOI-1 as the Sixer homeworld. The company had constructed it shortly after the contest began to serve as IOI's online base of operations. Our shuttle, which seemed to be flying on automatic pilot, quickly reached the planet and began to skim its mirrored surface. I stared out the window as we did one complete orbit. As far as I knew, no beater had ever been given this kind of tour. From pole to pole, IOI-1 was covered with armories, bunkers, warehouses, and vehicle hangars. I also saw airfields dotting the surface where rows of gleaming gunships, spacecraft, and mechanized battle tanks stood waiting for action. Sorrento said nothing as we surveyed the Sixer Armada. He just let me take it all in. I'd seen screenshots of IOI-1's surface before, but they'd been low res and taken from high orbit, just beyond the planet's impressive defense grid. The larger clans had been openly plotting to nuke the Sixer operations complex for several years now, but they never managed to get past the defense grid or reach the planet's surface. As we completed our orbit, the IOI operations complex swung into view ahead of us. It consisted of 3 mirror surface towers, 2 rectangular skyscrapers on either side of a circular one. Seen from above, these 3 buildings formed the IOI logo. The shuttle slowed and hovered above the O-shaped tower, then spiraled down to a small landing pad on the roof. Impressive digs, wouldn't you agree? Sorrento said, finally breaking his silence as we touched ground in the ramp lower. Not bad. I was proud of the calm in my voice. In truth, I was still reeling from everything I'd just seen. This is an Oasis replica of the real IOI towers located in downtown Columbus, right? I said. Sorrento nodded. Yes, the Columbus complex is our company headquarters. Most of my team works in this central tower. Our close proximity to GSS eliminates any possibility of system lag. And of course, Columbus doesn't suffer from the rolling power blackouts of that plague most major US cities. He was stating the obvious. Gregarious Simulation Systems was located in Columbus, and so was their main iOS server vault. Redundant mirror servers were located all around the world, but they were all linked to the main node in Columbus. This was why, in the decades since the simulation's launch, the city had become a kind of high-tech mecca. Columbus was where an Oasis user could get the fastest, most reliable connection to the simulation. Most beaters dreamed of moving there someday, me included. I followed Sorrento off the shuttle and into an elevator adjacent to the landing pad. You've become quite the celebrity these past few days, he said as we began to descend. It must be very exciting for you. Probably a little scary too, huh? Knowing you now possess information that millions of people would be willing to kill for? I've been waiting for him to say something like this, so I had a reply prepared. Do you mind skipping the scare tactics and head games? Just tell me the details of your offer. I have other matters to attend to. He grinned at me like I was a precocious child. Yes, I'm sure you do, he said. But please, don't jump to any conclusions about our offer. I think you'll be quite surprised. Then, with a sudden touch of steel in his tone, he added, in fact, I'm certain of it. Doing my best to hide the intimidation I felt, I rolled my eyes and said, whatever, man. A tone sounded as we reached the 106th floor, and the elevator doors swished open. I followed Sorrento past another receptionist and down a long, brightly lit corridor. The decor was something out of a utopian sci-fi flick, high-tech and immaculate. We passed several other Sixer avatars as we walked, and the moment they saw Sorrento, they each snapped to rigid attention and saluted him, as if he were some high-ranking general. Sorrento didn't return these salutes or acknowledge his underlings in any way. Eventually, he led me into a huge open room that appeared to occupy most of the 106th floor. It contained a vast sea of high-walled cubicles, each containing a single person strapped into a high-end immersion rig. Welcome to the Iowa's Oology Division, Sorrento said with obvious pride. So, this is Suxor Central, eh? I said, glancing around. There's no need to be rude, Sorrento said. This could be your team. Would I get my very own cubicle? No, you would have your own office with a very nice view, he grinned. Not that you'd spend much time looking at it. I motioned to one of the new Habishaw immersion rigs. Nice gear, I said. It really was, too, state of the art. Yes, it is nice, isn't it, he said. Our immersion rigs are heavily modified, and they're all networked together. Our systems allow multiple operators control any one of our Oologist avatars, so depending on the obstacle an avatar encounters during their quest, control can be instantly transferred to the team member with the skills best suited to deal with the situation. Yeah, but that's cheating, I said. Oh, come on now, he said, rolling his eyes. There's no such rules. Holiday's contest doesn't have any rules. That's one of the many colossal mistakes the old fool made. Before I could reply, Sorrento started walking again, leading me on through the maze of cubicles. All of our Oologists are voice linked to a support team composed of Halliday scholars, video game experts, pop culture historians, and cryptologists. They all work together to help each of our avatars overcome any challenge and solve every puzzle they encounter. He turned and grinned at me. As you can see, we've covered all the bases, Parzival. That's why we're going to win. Yeah, I said, you guys have been doing a huge bang-up job so far. Bravo! Now, why is it that we're talking again? Oh, right. You guys have no clue where the copper key is, and you need my help to find it. Sorrento narrowed his eyes. Then he began to laugh. I like you, kid, he said, grinning at me. You're bright. You've got cojones. 2 qualities I greatly admire. We continued walking. A few minutes later, we arrived in Sorrento's enormous office. Its windows afforded a stunning view of the surrounding city. The sky was filled with air cars and spacecraft, and the planet's simulated sun was just beginning to set. Sorrento sat behind his desk and offered me the chair directly across from him. Here we go, I thought as I sat down. Play it cool, Wade. So I'll cut to the chase, he said. IOI wants to recruit you as a consultant to assist with our search for Halliday's Easter egg. You'll have all of our company's vast resources at your disposal. Money, weapons, magic items, ships, artifacts, you name it. What would my title be? Chief Oologist, he replied. You'd be in charge of the entire division, second in command only to me. I'm talking 5,000 highly trained combat-ready avatars, all taking orders directly from you. Sounds pretty sweet, I said, trying hard to sound nonchalant. Of course it does, but there's more. In exchange for your services, we're willing to pay $2 million a year with a $1 million signing bonus up front. And if and when you help us find the egg, you'll get a $25 million bonus. I pretended to add up all those numbers on my fingers. Wow, I said, sounding impressed. Can I work from home too? Sorrento couldn't seem to tell whether or not I was joking. No, he said, I'm afraid not. You'll have to relocate here to Columbus, but we'll provide you with excellent living quarters here on the premises, and a private office, of course. Your own state-of-the-art immersion rig. Hold on, I said, holding up a hand. You mean I'd have to live in the IOI skyscraper with you and all the other oologists? He nodded. Just until you help us find the egg. I resisted the urge to gag. What about benefits? Would I get healthcare, dental, vision, keys to the executive washroom, shit like that? Of course, he said, starting to sound impatient. So, what do you say? Can I think about it for a few days? Afraid not, he said. This could all be over in a few days. We need your answer now. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, pretending to consider the offer. Sorrento waited, watching me intently. I was about to give him my prepared answer when he raised a hand. Now, just listen to me a moment before you answer, Sorrento said. I know most beaters cling to the absurd notion that IOI is evil, and that the Sixers are ruthless corporal drones with no honor and respect with no respect for the true spirit of the contest. That we're all sellouts, right? I nodded, barely resisting the urge to say, that's putting it mildly. Well, that's ridiculous, he said, flashing an avuncular grin that I suspected was generated by whatever diplomacy software he was running. The Sixers are really no different than a beater clan, albeit a well-funded one. We share all the same accessions as beaters, and we have the same goal. What goal is that? I wanted to shout. To ruin the Oasis forever? To pervert and defile the only thing that has ever made our lives bearable? Sorrento seemed to take my silence as a cue that he should continue. You know, contrary to popular belief, the Oasis really won't change that drastically when IOI takes control of it. Sure, we'll have to start charging everyone a monthly user fee and increase the Sims advertising revenue, but we plan to make a lot of improvements. Avatar content filters, stricter construction guidelines. We're going to make the Oasis a better place. No, I thought, you're going to turn it into a fascist corpo theme park where the few people who can still afford the price of admission no longer have an ounce of freedom. Okay. I'd heard as much of this jerk's sales pitch as I could stand. Okay, I said. Count me in. Signing up. Whatever you guys call it. I'm in. Sorrento looked surprised. This clearly wasn't the answer he'd been expecting. He smiled wide and was about to offer me his hand again when I cut him off. But I have 3 minor conditions, I said. First, I want a $50 million bonus when I find the egg for you guys. Not 25. Is that doable? He didn't even hesitate. Done. What are your other conditions? I don't want to be second in command, I said. I want your job, Sorrento. I want to be in charge of the whole shebang. Chief of operations. El numero uno. Oh, And I want everyone to have to call me El Numero Uno too. Is that possible? My mouth seemed to be operating independent of my brain. I couldn't help myself. Sorrento's smile had vanished. What else? I don't want to work with you. I leveled a finger at him. You give me the creeps. But if your superiors are willing to fire ass and give me your position, I'm in. Done deal. Silence. Sorrento's face was a stoic mask. He probably had certain emotions, like rage, like anger and rage, filtered out on his facial recognition software. Could you check with your bosses and let me know if they'll agree to that? I asked. Or are they monitoring? Are they monitoring us right now? I'm betting they are. I waved to the invisible cameras. Hey guys, what do you say? There was a long silence, during which Sorrento simply glared at me. Of course monitoring us, he said finally, and they've just informed me that they're willing to agree to each of your demands. He didn't sound all that upset. Really? Really? I said, great! When can I start? And more importantly, when can you leave? Immediately, he said. The company will prepare your contract and send it to your lawyer for approval. Then they will fly you here to Columbus to sign the paperwork and close the deal. He stood. That should conclude. Actually, I held up a hand, cutting him off again. I spent the last few seconds thinking this over a bit more, and I'm going to have to pass on your offer. I think I'd rather find the egg on my own. Thanks. I stood up. You and the other Suxors can all go fuck a duck. Sorrento began to laugh. A long, hearty laugh that I found more than a little disturbing. Oh, you're good. That was so good. You really had us going there, kid. When his laugh tapered off, he said, that's the answer I was expecting. So now, let me give you our second proposal. There's more? I sat back down and put my feet up on his desk. Okay, shoot. We'll wire $5 million directly to your Oasis account right now in exchange for a walkthrough up to the first gate. That's all. All you have to do is give us a step-by-step instructions. Give us detailed step-by-step instructions on how to do what you've already done. We'll take it from there. You'll be free to continue searching for the egg on our own, and our transaction will remain a complete secret. No one ever need to know of it. I admit, I actually considered it for a second. $5 million would set me up for life, and even if I helped the Sixers clear the first gate, there was no guarantee they'd be able to clear the other two. I still wasn't sure if I would be able to do that. Trust me, son, Sorrento said. You should take this offer while you can. His paternal tone irked me to no end, and that helped steel my resolve. I couldn't sell out to the Sixers. If I did, and they did somehow manage to win the contest, I'd be the one responsible. There was no way I'd be able to live with that. I just hoped that H, Arthremus, and any other beaters they approached felt the same way. I'll pass, I said. I slid my feet off his desk and said, thanks for your time. Sorrento looked at me sadly, then motioned for me to sit back down. Actually, we're not quite done here. We have one final proposal for you, Parzival, and I've saved the best for last. Can't you take a hint? You can't buy me, so piss off. Adios. Goodbye. Sit down, Wade. I froze. Had he just used my real name? That's right. Sorrento barked. We know who you are, Wade Owen Watts, born August 12th, 2026, both parents deceased. We also know where you are. You reside with your aunt in a trailer park located at 700 Portland Avenue in Oklahoma City. Unit 56K to be exact. According to our surveillance team, you were last seen entering your aunt's trailer 3 days ago and you haven't left since, which means you're still there now. A vid feed window opened directly behind him, displaying a live video feed image of the stacks where I lived. It was an aerial view, maybe being shot from plane or a satellite. From this angle, they could monitor the trailer's only 2 main exits, so they hadn't seen me leave through the laundry room window each morning or return through it each night. They didn't know I was actually in my hideout right now. There you are, Sorrento said. His pleasant, condescending tone had returned. You should really go out more, Wade. It's not healthy to spend all your time indoors. The image magnified a few times, zooming in on my aunt's trailer. Then it switched over to a thermal imaging mode, and I could see the glowing outlines of over a dozen people, children and adults, sitting inside. Nearly all of them were motionless, probably logged into the Oasis. I was too stunned to speak. How had they found me? It was supposed to be impossible for anyone to obtain your Oasis account information, and my address wasn't even in my Oasis account. You didn't have to provide it when you created your avatar, just your name and retinal pattern. So how had they found out where I lived? Somehow, they must have gotten access to my school records. Your first instinct right now might be to log out and make a run for it, Sorrento said. I urge you not to make that mistake. Your trailer is currently wired to a large quantity of high explosives. He pulled something that looked like a remote control out of his pocket and held it up. And my finger is on the detonator. If you log out of this chat session, you will die within seconds. Do you understand what I'm saying to you, Mr. Watts? I nodded slowly, trying desperately to get a grip on the situation. He was bluffing. He had to be bluffing. And even if he wasn't, he didn't know that I was actually half a mile away in my hideout. Sorrento assumed that one of the glowing thermal outlines on the display was me. If a bomb really did go off in my aunt's trailer, I'd be safe down here, under all these junk cars, wouldn't I? Besides, they would never kill all those people just to get me. How? That was all I could get out. How did we find out who you are and where you live? Easy, he grinned. Easy. Easy. You screwed up, kid. When you enrolled in the Oasis public school system, you gave them your name and your address so they could mail you your report cards, I suppose. He was right. My avatar's name, my real name, and my home address were all stored in my private student file, which only the principal could access. It was a stupid mistake, but I'd enrolled the year before the contest even began. Before I became a beater. Before I learned to conceal my real-world identity. How did you find out I attend school online? I asked. I already knew the answer, but I needed to solve for time. There's a rumor circulating on the beater message boards the past few days that you and your pal H both go to school on Ludus. When we heard that, we decided to contact a few OPS administrators and offer them a bribe. Do you know how little a school administrator makes a year, Wade? It's scandalous. One of your principals was kind enough to search the student database for the avatar name Parzival. And guess what? Another window appeared beside the live video feed of the stacks. It displayed my entire student profile, my full name, avatar name, student alias, Wade 3, date of birth, social security number, and home address, my school transcripts. It was all there, along with an old yearbook photo taken over 5 years ago, right before I transferred to school in the Oasis. We have your friend H's school records too, but he was smart enough to give a fake name and address when he enrolled, so finding him will take a bit longer. He paused to let me reply, but I remained silent, my pulse racing, and I had to keep reminding myself to breathe. So that brings us to our final proposal. Sorrento rubbed his hands together excitedly like a kid about to open a present. Tell us, how to reach the first gate right now, or we will kill you right now. You're bluffing, I heard myself say, but I didn't think he was. Not at all. No, Wade, I'm not. Think about it. With everything else that's going on in the world, do you think anyone will care about an explosion in some ghetto trash rat warren in Oklahoma City? They'll assume it was a drug lab accident, or maybe a domestic terrorist cell trying to build a homemade bomb. Either way, it will just mean there are a few hundred less human cockroaches out there collecting food vouchers and using precious oxygen. No one will care. And the authorities won't even blink. He was right, and I knew it. I tried to stall for a few seconds so I could figure out what to do. You'd kill me? I said, to win a video game contest? Don't pretend to be naive, Wade, Sorrento said. There are billions of dollars at stake here, along with control of one of the world's most profitable corporations and of the Oasis itself. This is much more than a video game contest. It always has been. He leaned forward. But you can still come out here a winner, kid. If you help us, we'll still give you the $5 million. You can retire at age 18 and spend the rest of your days living like royalty, or you can die in the next few seconds. It's your call. But ask yourself this question. If your mother were still alive, what would she want you to do? That last question would really have pissed me off if I hadn't been so scared. What's to stop you from killing me after I give you what you want? I asked. Regardless of what you may think, we don't want to have to kill anyone unless it's absolutely necessary. Besides, there's 2 gates, right? He shrugged. We might need your help to figure those out too. Personally, I don't doubt it. I doubt it. But my superiors feel differently. Regardless, you don't really have a choice at this point now, do you? He lowered his voice as if he were about to share a secret. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me step-by-step instructions on how to obtain the copper key and clear the first gate. And you're going to stay logged into this chat-link session while we verify everything you tell us. Log out before I say it's okay, and your whole world goes boom. Understand? Now, start talking. I considered giving them what they wanted. I really did, but I thought it through, and I couldn't come up with a single good reason why they would let me live, even if I helped them clear the first gate. The only move that made sense was to kill me and take me out of the running. They sure as hell weren't going to give me $5 million or leave me alive to tell the media how IOI had blackmailed me. Especially if there really was a remote-controlled bomb planted in my trailer to serve as evidence. No. The way I saw it, there were really only 2 possibilities. Either they were bluffing, or they were going to kill me, whether I helped them or not. I made my decision and summoned my courage. Sorrento, I said, trying to hide the fear in my voice, I want you and your bosses to know something. You're never going to find Halliday's egg. You know why? Because he was smarter than all of you put together. It doesn't matter how much money you have or who you try to blackmail. You're going to lose. I tapped my logout icon, and my avatar began to dematerialize in front of him. He didn't seem surprised. He just looked at me sadly and shook his head. Stupid move, kid, he said just before my visor went black. I sat there in the darkness of my hideout, wincing and waiting for the detonation, but a full minute passed and nothing happened. I slid my visor up and pulled off my gloves with shaking hands. As my eyes began to adjust to the darkness, I let out a tentative sigh of relief. It had been a bluff after all. Sorrento had been playing an elaborate mind game with me, an effective one too. As I was gulping down a bottle of water, I realized I should log back in and warn H and Arthremis. The Sixers would go after them next. I was pulling my gloves back on when I heard the explosion. I felt the shockwave a split second later after I heard the detonation and instinctively dropped to the floor of my hideout with my arms wrapped over my head. In the distance, I could hear the sound of rending metal as several trailer stacks began to collapse, ripping free of their scaffolding and crashing against one another like massive dominoes. These horrific sounds continued for what sounded like a very long time. Then, it was silent again. I eventually overcame my paralysis and opened the rear door of the van. In a nightmare-like daze, I made my way to the outskirts of the junk pile, and from there, I could see a giant pillar of smoke and flames rising from the opposite end of the stacks. I followed the stream of people already running in that direction along the northern perimeter of the stacks. The stack containing my aunt's trailer had collapsed into a fiery, smoking ruin along with all the stacks adjacent to it. There was nothing there now but a massive pile of twisted, flaming metal. I kept my distance, but a large crowd of people had already gathered ahead of me, standing as close to the blaze as they dared. No one bothered trying to enter the wreckage to look for survivors. It was obvious there weren't going to be any. An ancient propane tank attached to one of the crushed trailers detonated in a small explosion, causing the crowd to scatter and dive for cover. Several more tanks detonated in rapid succession. After that, the onlookers moved much further back and kept their distance. The residents who lived in the nearby stacks knew that if the fire spread, they were in big trouble. So a lot of people were already scrambling to fight the blaze, using garden hoses, buckets, empty big gulp cups, and whatever else they could find. Before long, the flames were contained and the fire began to die out. As I watched, I could hear the people around me murmuring, saying that it was probably another meth lab accident, or that some idiot must have been trying to build a homemade bomb. Just as Sorrento had predicted. That thought snapped me out of my daze. What was I thinking? The Sixers had just tried to kill me. They probably still had agents lurking here in the stacks, checking to make sure I was dead. And like a total idiot, I was standing right out in the open. I faded away from the crowd and hurried back to my hideout, being careful not to run, constantly glancing over my shoulder to make sure I wasn't being followed. Once I was back in the van, I slammed and locked the door, then curled into a quivering ball in the corner. I stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, the shock began to wear off, and the reality of what just happened started to sink in. My Aunt Alice and her boyfriend Rick were dead, along with everyone else who had lived in our trailer and in the trailers below and around it, including sweet Mrs. Gilmore. And if I had been home, I would be dead too. I was jacked up on adrenaline, unsure of what to do next. Overcome by a paralyzing mixture of fear and rage, I thought about logging into the Oasis to call the police, but then considered how they would react when I told them my story. They'd think I was a raving nut job. There was no way anyone would believe my story, not unless I revealed that I was Parzival. And maybe not even then. I didn't even have a shred of proof against Sorrento and the Sixers. All traces of the bomb they planted were probably already melting into slag right now. Revealing my identity to the world so that I could accuse one of the world's most powerful corporations of blackmail and murder didn't seem like the smartest move. No one would believe me. I could barely believe myself. IOI had actually tried to kill me to prevent me from winning a video game contest. It was insane! I seemed to be safe in my hideout for the moment, but I knew I couldn't stay in the stacks for much longer. When the Sixers found out I was still alive, they would come back here looking for me. I needed to get the hell out of Dodge. But I couldn't do that until I had some money, and my first endorsement checks wouldn't be deposited for another day or two. I would have to lie low until then. But right now, I needed to talk to H to warn him that he was next on the Sixers hit list. Whew. One more chapter, and then I'll stop for the night. I grabbed my Oasis console and powered it on, then pulled on my visor and gloves. As I logged in, my avatar reappeared in Ludus on the hilltop where I'd been sitting prior to my chat room session with Sorrento. The moment my audio locked in, I heard the ear-splitting roar of engines coming from somewhere directly overhead. I stepped out from under the tree and looked up. I saw a squadron of Sixer gunships flying in formation, zooming south at low altitude, their sensors scanning the surface as they went. I was about to duck back under the tree, out of sight, when I remembered that all of Ludus was a no PvP zone. The Sixers couldn't harm me here. Even so, my nerves were still on edge. I continued to scan the gunship. I continued to scan the sky and quickly spotted two more Sixer gunship squadrons off near the eastern horizon. A moment later, several more squadrons dropped in from orbit to the north and west. It looked like an alien invasion. An icon flashed on my display, informing me that I had a new text message from H. Where the hell are you? Call me ASAFP. I tapped his name on my contact list, and he answered on the first ring. His avatar's face appeared in my vidfeed window. He was wearing a grim expression. Did you hear the news? He asked. What news? What news? The Sixers are on Ludus, thousands of them, more arriving every minute. They're searching the planet, looking for the tomb. Yeah, I'm on Ludus right now. Sixer gunships everywhere. H scowled. When I find Iraq, I'm going to kill him slowly. Then, when he creates a new avatar, I'm going to hunt him down and kill him again. If that moron had kept his mouth shut, the Sixers never would have thought to look here. Yeah, his forum posts were what tipped them off. Sorrento said so himself. Sorrento? As in Nolan Sorrento? I told him everything that had happened in the past few hours. They blew up your house? Actually, it was a trailer, I said. In a trailer park. They killed a lot of people here, H. It's probably already on the news feeds. I took a deep breath. I'm freaking out. I'm scared. I don't blame you, he said. Thank God you weren't home when it happened. I nodded. I almost never log in from home. Luckily, the Sixers don't know that. What about your family? It was my aunt's place. She's dead, I think. We weren't very close. This was a huge understatement, of course. My aunt Alice had never showed me much kindness, but she still hadn't deserved to die. But the most gut-wrenching guilt I now felt had to do with Mrs. Gilmore, and the knowledge that my actions had gotten her killed. She was one of the sweetest people I'd ever known. I realized I was sobbing. I muted my audio so H wouldn't hear, then took several deep breaths until I got myself under control again. I can't believe this, H growled. Those evil pricks, they're gonna pay, Z. Count on it. We will make them pay for this. I couldn't see how, but I didn't argue. I knew he was just trying to make me feel better. Where are you right now? H asked. Do you need help, like a place to stay or something? I could wire you some money if you need it. No, I'm okay, I said. But thanks, man. I really appreciate the offer. De nada, amigo. Listen, did the Sixers send you the same email they sent me? Yeah, thousands of them. But I just decided it was best to ignore them. I frowned. I wish I'd been smart enough to do that. Dude, you had no way of knowing they were gonna try and kill you. Besides, they already had your home address. If you ignored their emails, they probably would have set off that bomb anyway. Listen, H. Sorrento said that your school records contain a fake home address and that they don't know where to find you. But he might have been lying. You should leave home. Go somewhere safe as soon as possible. Don't worry about me, Z. I stay mobile. Those bastards will never find me. If you say so, I replied, wondering what exactly he meant. But I need to warn Arthremis too, and Dido, and Shoto if I can reach them. The Sixers are probably doing everything they can to learn their identities too. That gives me an idea, he said. We should invite all three of them to meet in the basement later tonight. Say, around midnight, a private chat room session, just the five of us. My mood brightened at the prospect of seeing Arthremis again. Do you think they'll agree to come? Yeah. If we let them know their lives depended on it, he smirked. And we're going to have the world's top 5 beaters together in one chat room. Who's gonna sit that one out? I sent Arthremis a short message asking her to meet us in H's private chat room at midnight. She replied just a few minutes later, promising to be there. H had told me he'd managed to reach Dido and Shoto, and they both also agreed to attend. The meeting was set. I didn't feel like being alone, so I logged into the basement about an hour early. H was already there, surfing news feeds on the ancient RCA television. Without saying a word, he got up and gave me a hug. Even though I couldn't actually feel it, I found it surprisingly comforting. Then, We both sat down and watched news coverage together while we waited for the others to arrive. Every channel was airing Oasis footage showing the hordes of Sixer spacecraft and troops that were currently arriving on Ludus. It was easy for everyone to guess why they were there, and so now every beater in simulation was also headed for Ludus. Transportation terminals all over the planet were jammed with incoming avatars. So much for keeping the tomb's location a secret, I said, shaking my head. It was bound to leak out eventually, H said, shutting off the TV. I just didn't think it would happen this fast. We both heard an entrance alert chime as Arthremis materialized at the top of the staircase. She was wearing the same outfit she'd had on the night we met. She waved to me as she descended the steps. I waved back. Then we made introductions. H, meet Arthremis. Arthremis, this is my best friend, H. Pleasure to meet you, Arthremis said, extending her right hand. H shook it. Likewise, he flashed his Cheshire grin. Thanks for coming. Are you kidding? How could I miss it? The very first meeting of the High Five. The High Five, I said? Yeah, H said. That's what they're calling us all on the message boards now. We hold the top 5 high score slots on them scoreboards, so we're the High Five. Right, at least for the time being. Arthremis grinned at that, then turned and began to wander around the basement, admiring the 80s decor. H, this is by far the coolest chat room I've ever seen. Thank you, he bowed his head. Kind of you to say. She stopped to browse through the shelf of role-playing game supplements. You've recreated Morrow's basement perfectly. Every last detail. I want to live here. You've got a permanent spot on the guest list. Log in and hang out anytime. Really? She said, clearly delighted. Thank you. I will. You're the man, H. Yes, he said, smiling. It's true. I am. They really seemed to be hitting it off, and it was making me crazy jealous. I didn't want Arthremis to like H or vice versa. I wanted her all to myself. Dido and Shoto logged in a moment later, appearing simultaneously at the top of the basement staircase. Dido was the taller of the two and appeared to be in his late teens. Shoto was a foot younger and looked much younger, maybe about 13. Both avatars looked Japanese, and they both bore a striking resemblance to one another, like snapshots of the same young man taken 5 years apart. They wore matching suits of traditional samurai army, and each had both a short wakizashi and a longer katana strapped to his belt. Greetings, the tall samurai said. I am Dido, and this is my little brother, Shoto. Thank you for the invitation. We are honored to meet all 3 of you. They bowed in unison. H and Arthremis returned the bow, and I quickly followed suit. As we introduced ourselves again, Dido and Shoto bowed to us once again, and once again we each returned the gesture. All right, said H. Once all the bowing had ended. Let's get this party started. I'm sure you've all seen the news. The Sixers are swarming all over Ludus, thousands of them. They're conducting a systematic search of the entire surface of the planet. Even if they don't know exactly what they're looking for, it won't be long before they find the entrance to the tomb. Actually, Arthremis interrupted. They already found it over 30 minutes ago. We all turned to look at her. That hasn't been reported on the news feeds yet, Dido said. Are you sure? She nodded. Afraid so. When I heard about the Sixers this morning, I decided to hide an uplink camera in some trees near the tomb entrance to keep an eye on the area. She opened a vid feed window in the air in front of us and spun it around so the rest of us could see. It showed a wide shot of the flat-topped hill and the clearing around it. Looking down from a spot in one of the trees high above, from this angle it was easy to see that the large black stones on top of the hill were arranged to look like a human skull. We could also see that the entire area was crawling with Sixers, and more seemed to be arriving every second. But the most disturbing thing we saw in the vid feed was the large transparent dome of energy that now covered the entire hill. Son of a bitch, H said. Is that what I think it is? Arthremus nodded. A force field. The Sixers installed it just before the first of them arrived, so from here on out, Dido said, any beater who finds the tomb won't be able to get inside. Not unless they can somehow get through that force field. Actually, they've put up 2 force fields, Arthremus said. A small field with a larger field over it. They lower them in sequence whenever they have to let more Sixers enter the tomb, like an airlock. She pointed to the window. Watch. They're doing it now. A squadron of Sixers marched down the loading ramp of a gunship parked nearby. They all appeared to be lugging equipment containers. As they approached the outer force field, it vanished, revealing a smaller domed field inside the first. As soon as the squadron reached the wall of the inner force field, the outer wall reappeared. A second later, this inner force field was dropped, allowing the Sixers to enter the tomb. There was a long silence while we all contemplated the new development. I suppose it could be worse, H said finally. If the tomb were in a PvP zone, those assholes would have already had laser cannons and robot sentries mounted everywhere, to vaporize anyone who approached the area. He was right. Since Ludus was a safe zone, the Sixers couldn't harm beaters who approached the tomb, but there was nothing to stop them from erecting a force field to keep them out, so that was exactly what they'd done. The Sixers have obviously been planning for this. The Sixers have obviously been planning for this moment for some time now, Arthremus said, closing her vid feed window. They won't be able to keep everyone out for very long, H said. When the clans find out about this, it'll be all-out war. There will be thousands of beaters attacking that force field with everything they got. RPGs, fireballs, cluster bomb, nukes. It's gonna get ugly. They'll turn that forest into a wasteland. Yeah, but in the meantime, Sixer avatars will be farming the copper key, then filing their avatars through the first gate, one after another, in a freaking conga line. But how can they do this? Shoto asked, his young voice brimming with rage. He looked to his brother. It's not fair! They not praying fair! They don't have to. There are no laws in the Oasis, little brother, Dido said. The Sixers can do whatever they please. They won't stop until someone stops them. The Sixers have no honor, Shoto said, scowling. You guys don't know the half of it, H said. That's why Parzival and I asked you all to be here. He turned to me. Z, you want to tell him what happened? I nodded, turned to the others. First, I told them about the email I received from IOI. They had all received the same invitation but had wisely ignored it. Then, I related the details to my chat room session with Sorrento, doing my best not to leave anything out. Finally, I told them about how our conversation had ended, with a bomb detonated on my home address. By the time I finished, their avatars all wore looks of stunned disbelief. Jeez, Arthremus whispered. No joke? No cap? They tried to kill you? Yeah, and they would have succeeded too if I'd been home. I was just lucky. Now, you all know how far the Sixers are willing to go to stop us from beating them to the egg, H said. If they are able to locate any one of us, we're dead meat. I nodded. So you should all take precautions to protect yourselves and your identities, I said, if you haven't already. They all nodded. There was another long silence. Another long silence. There's still one thing I don't understand, Arthremus said a moment later. How did the Sixers know to look for the tomb on Ludus? Did someone tip them off? She glanced around at each of us, but there was no hint of accusation in her voice. They must have seen the rumors about Parzival and H that were posted. What shit? They must have seen the rumor about Parzival and H that posts on all the beater message board, Shoto said. That's how we knew where to look to rook there. Dido winced, then punched his little brother in the shoulder. Did I tell you keep silent, Brabbermouth? He hissed. Shoto looked sheepish and climbed up. What rumors? Arthremis asked. She looked at me. What's he talking about? I haven't had time to check the board in a few days. Several posts were made by... Several posts made by Beater who claimed to know part the bar and H saying they were both student on Rudis. He turned to H and me. My brother and I spent past 2 years searching for a tomb of horror. We scoured dozen were looking for it, but we never thought to look on Rudis. Not till we hear you attend school here. It never occurred to me that attending school on Ludus was something I needed to keep a secret, I said, so I didn't. Yeah, and it's lucky for us that you didn't, H said. He turned to the others. Parzival unintentionally tipped me off about the tomb's location, too. I never thought to look for it on Ludus either, until his name appeared on the scoreboard. Dido nudged his younger brother, and they both faced me and bowed. You were first to find tomb hiding place, so we owe you gratitude for reading us to it. I returned their bow. Thanks, guys, but actually... Arthremis had found it first, totally on her own, a month before I did. Yeah, for all the good it did me, Arthremis said, I couldn't defeat the Lich at Joust. I'd been at it for weeks when this punk showed up and did it on his first try. She explained how we met and how she finally managed to beat the king the following day, right after the server reset at midnight. I have H here to thank for my jousting prowess, I said. We used to play all the time here in the basement. That's the only reason why I beat the king on my first attempt. Ditto, H said. He stretched out his hand and we bumped fists. You sound like a Chinese. Well, I don't know Japanese. I don't know Japanese caricature. I only know Chinese caricature. Look. There's a reason why I only know Chinese caricature and I don't know Japanese caricature. So we're gonna go with Chinese caricature because that's based in the year 2077. What makes a man Asian? I'll tell you, he sounds Chinese. Plus 100 social credit, by the way. Thanks, thank you. I'll take that. Dido and Shoto both smiled. It was same with us, Dido said. My brother and I. Been playing joust against each other for a year because game mentioned in Anorak Almanac. Great, Artemis said, throwing up her hands. Good for you guys. You were all prepared in advance. I'm so happy for you. Bravo. She gave us all a sarcastic golf clap, which made everyone laugh. Now can we adjourn the Mutual Admiration Society and get back to the topic at hand? Sure, said H. H said, smiling. What was the topic at hand? The Sixers, Artemis offered. Right, of course. H rubbed the back of his neck while biting his lower lip. Something he always did when he was trying to gather his thoughts. You said they found his tomb in less than an hour ago, right? So any minute now, they'll be reaching the throne room and face off against the Lich. But what do you think happens when the multiple avatars enter the burial room at the same time? I turned to Dido and Shoto. Your names appeared on the scoreboard on the same day, just a few minutes apart. So you entered the throne room together, didn't you? Dido nodded. Yes, he said. And when we stepped on days, 2 copies of King appeared, one for each of us to pray. Great, Artemis said. So it might be possible that for hundreds of Sixers to joust for the copper key at the same time, or even thousands. Yeah, Shoto said, but to get to key, each Sixer had to beat Lich at joust, which we all know isn't easy. The Sixers are using hacked immersion rigs, I said. Sorrento was boasting about it to me. They've got it all set up so that different users can control the actions of every one of their avatars. So they can just have their best joust players take control of each Sixer avatar during the match against Acererak. One after the other. Cheating bastards, H repeated. The Sixer have no honor, Dido said, shaking his head. Yeah, Arthremis said, rolling her eyes. We have established that. It gets worse, I said. every Sixer has a support team made of Halliday scholars, video game experts, cryptologists who are there to help them beat every challenge and solve every puzzle they encounter. Playing through the war game simulation will be a piece of cake for them. Someone will just feed them the dialogue. Unbelievable, H muttered. How are we supposed to compete with that? We can't, Artemis said. Once they have the copper key, they'll probably locate the first gate just as quickly as we all did. It won't take them very long to catch up with us, and once they have the riddle about the Jade key, they'll have their eggheads working around the clock to decipher it. If they find the Jade key's hiding place before we do, we'll barricade it too, I said. And then the 5 of us will be in the same boat everyone else is in right now. Artemis nodded. H kicked the coffee table in frustration. This isn't even remotely fair, he said. The Sixers have a huge advantage over all of us. They've got an endless supply of money, weapons, vehicles, and avatars. There are thousands of them all working together. Right, I said, and each of us is on our own. Well, except for you two, I nodded at Dido and Shoto. But you know what I mean. They've got us outnumbered and outgunned. That isn't going to change anytime soon. What you suggesting? Dido asked. He suddenly sounded uneasy. I'm not suggesting anything. I said, I'm just stating the facts as I see them. Good, Dido replied. Because it sound right, you bout propose some alliance between 5 of us. H studied carefully. So, would that be such a terrible idea? Yes, it would, Dido curtly. My brother and I hunt our own. We don't want or need your help. Oh, really? H said. A second ago, you admitted needing Parzival's help to find the Tomb of Horrors. Dido's eyes narrowed. We would have found on our own. Eventually. Right, H said. It probably would have only taken you another 5 years. Oh, come on, H, I said, stepping in between them. This isn't helping. H and Dido glared at each other in silence, while Shoto stared up at his brother uncertainly. Arthremus just stood back and watched, looking somewhat amused. We didn't come here be inserted, Dido said. We reeve. Hold on, Dido. Just wait a second, will you? Let's talk this out. We shouldn't part as enemies. We're all on the same side here. No, Dido said. We not. You are strangers to us. For all we know, any one of you, Sixer spy. Arthremus laughed out loud, then covered her mouth. Dido ignored her. This pointless, he said. Only one person first to find egg win prize, he said. And that person be my brother or me. And with that, Dido and Shoto both abruptly logged out. That went well, Arthremus said once our avatars had vanished. I nodded. Yeah, real smooth, H. Way to build bridges. What did I do? He said defensively. Dido was being a complete asshole. Besides, it's not like we were asking him to team up anyway. I'm in a valid solo, and so are you. And Arthremus here sure looks like the lone wolf type too. Guilty as charged, she said, gritty. But even so, there is an argument to be made for forming an alliance against the Sixers. Maybe, H said. But think about it. If you find the Jade Key before either of us, are you going to be generous and tell us where it is? Arthremus smirked. Of course not. Me neither, H said. So there's no point in discussing an alliance. Well then, it looks like this meeting is over. I should get going. She winked at me. Clock is ticking. Right, boys? Tick-tock, I said. Good luck, fellas. She gave us both a wave. See you around. See ya, we both answered in unison. I watched her avatar slowly disappear, then turned to find H smiling at you. What are you grinning about? I asked. You got a crush on her, don't ya? What, on Arthur's? No, don't deny it, Z. You were making googly eyes at her the whole time she was here. He did his impression of this, clasping both hands to his chest and batting his eyelashes like a silent film star. I recorded the whole chat stream. Do you want me to play it back for you so you can see how silly you looked? Stop being a dick. It's understandable, man, H said. That girl is super cute. So Whatever. So, have you had any luck with the new riddle? I said, deliberately changing the subject. That quatrain about the jade key? Quatrain? A poem or stanza with 4 lines and an alternating rhyme scheme, I recited. It's called a quatrain. H rolled his eyes. You're too much. You're too much, man. What? That's just the proper form of it. Proper term for it, asshead. It's just a riddle, dude. And no, I haven't had any luck figuring it out yet. Me neither, I said. So we probably shouldn't be standing around jabbering at each other, trying to put our noses to the grindstone. I concur, he said, but... Just then, a stack of comic books on the other side of the room slid off the end table where they were piled and crashed to the floor as if something had knocked them over. H and I both jumped, then exchanged confused looks. What the hell was that? I said. I don't know. H walked over and examined the scattered comics. Maybe a software glitch or something? I've never seen a chat room glitch like that, I said, scanning the empty room. Could someone else be in here? An invisible avatar? Eavesdropping on us? H rolled his eyes. Ugh. No way, Z, he said. You're getting way too paranoid. This is an encrypted private chat room. No one can enter without my permission. You know that. Right, I said, still freaked out. Relax, it's a glitch. He rested a hand on my shoulder. Listen, let me know if you change your mind about needing a loan or a place to crash. Okay? I'll be alright, I said. But thanks, amigo. We bumped fists again, like the Wonder Twins activating their power. Really? They just bumped fists, that's it. There was no need for a metaphor here. Or there's no need for a simile here. Catch you later. Good luck, Z. Same to you, H. Whew.
Wow.
And that was that. That is that for tonight.
God fucking bless.
44%. Whew.
Clap, clap, clap.
Gonna need some more syrup. Dude, I'm actually fucking starving too. I want to eat I want to fatten up right now. I want to get on some of my Wade, know what I mean? But other than that, yeah, we'll continue same time tomorrow. So we'll see.
Alright, GG's.
Yeah, GG, night night. And for everyone else in the stream, we'll continue tomorrow, 8 p.m. 8 p.m. PST, following chapter. So if you want more pain, more distraction, there'll be more tomorrow. Until then, holy shit, I really need to get something to eat. I'm actually really fucking starving. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.